with liberty, justice for all. Okay, at this time, if I could have Bob Tinneberry come into the screen, open us up in prayer.
Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, we are thankful that you are a God that can give us peace in these troubled times. We're thankful that the cross gives us assurance that you love us and you have seen the end from the beginning. Father, we pray for the decision makers tonight that you would give them wisdom, discernment, and courage as they decide the business of the township tonight. And now we pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Okay, at this time, I look for the approval of the agenda. With one addition, I'd like to add the contract with the Monroe County Road Commission to add dust control under 8H. I sent out an email to everybody. You know, it's kind of last minute, but the road commission contacted me and asked if we could get that approved. Somehow it slipped through the cracks. So if nobody else has any changes or additions, I look for a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Make the motion to approve. Go ahead, TC.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Clemens, seconded by Mr. Steiner. Any discussion?
Yeah, could he said as presented, it should be as amended. Unless he doesn't want to accept your.
I apologize, as amended. Thank you, Nancy.
Second.
Okay. Could you call the roll, Ms. Hirschberger?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Up next is item 3, the consent agenda. The agenda committee recommends A, approve and place on file the minutes of the April 21st, 2020 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board. B, accept with regret the resignation of Paul Francis as treasurer of Bedford Township, effective at midnight on May 31st, 2020.
Mr. Supervisor, I would like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the change. I would like to pull part B off for discussion later on down at the 8C.
Okay, any discussion? I look for a second, and we'll have some discussion. I'll support that. Any discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please, Ms. Hirschberger?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye.
Okay, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, no presentations at this time. Item 5 is public comment, and I know it's a little delayed. So board members, let's give it about 30 to 40 seconds to let some public call in. Comments limited to 2 minutes for board agenda items only. If you're watching Buckeye Cable, you call in at the number with the screen, and we will patch you in. So we'll just go ahead and give it a few moments. Okay, I think we've waited long enough. Oh, there we go. Okay, we have a comment coming in.
Hi, this is Lamar Frederick, 3254 Deer Creek Drive in Lambertville. I want to take a minute to thank my old friend Paul Francis for his many years of service to the citizens of Bedford Township. He made Bedford Township a better place to live and had a significant impact on the quality of life for all of his citizens. Of course, he took their money twice a year with some relish, I think. I wish him well on his retirement, and also believe Garnet has a 2-page list of honeydews for him when he finally sits down and relaxes.
It's not a list, it's a book.
I also want to endorse his recommendation that Krista Jandasek replace him as Township Treasurer effective June 1st. Krista has many years' experience in the office as deputy for Paul, and the transition would be absolutely seamless. I have another issue on finance of the township, but I'll talk about that in the next public comment period.
Thank you for your comments. I believe we have one more public comment coming in. And George, if you can hear me, there's a pretty bad echo when people are speaking.
Supervisor?
Yeah.
If we could remind residents that are calling in that they need to turn their television down. That's the background noise we're receiving.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
This is Gail Kane, 1056 West Temperance. I would like to make my public comment in regards to congratulating Mr. Francis on his retirement. And I also believe that the board should endorse his selection, Krista Jandasek. She has the years of experience that are going to be needed to carry us through to at least the election time. And of course, that would be a good deal too. I also am asking the board to maybe discuss, but not make a final vote on 8D. There are a lot of concerning issues in that matter. And as far as 8G, I believe the employees deserve having the township's labor lawyer consulted and to work with them as they try to reach some compatible decisions in that matter. We have an awful lot of employees that probably could go. It was kind of implied at the last meeting that they all come from the Treasurer's Department, and that's not appropriate. We have too many others that could come from other departments. So that's my recommendation, and I will attempt to call back at the next time as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Have a good night. Okay, I don't think we have anybody else waiting to call in. Okay, so 6A, approval of change order 4 for renovations on Fire Station 1, Chief Massingill.
Good evening. I believe Mr. Jacobs is on the line in the lobby. He's calling in by phone. He's going to be better served to explain the change orders and the renovations than I will.
Okay. George, do you have Jim Jacobs waiting?
I'm on.
He's on.
You can go ahead then.
If you're on, Jim, go ahead and talk.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're talking about the change orders for,
Okay.
go ahead and let us
Okay.
know.
What it is? Okay, so there's basically 3 items that are on this change order. The first one was for ductwork connection in the existing bathroom, which was off of the administration area, or not off the administration, off of the training room or the garage. That had diffusers in it, but they were never connected to anything. So this is to provide the ductwork that would actually connect it to the furnace system. So that's what the $799 one is. The second item is related to the necessity to put in a recirculation pump because of the distance from the existing hot water heater to the existing toilet room. When the plumbing inspector came out, he wanted a recirculation pump because it's over 50 feet. Even though it's existing plumbing, they wanted to have that recirc pump put in to comply with today's standards. And because of that, we also had to put in a floor drain actually the floor drain was related to the necessity to put a backflow preventer in for the new water service, which required a floor drain. So that's 3 plumbing pieces put together, the recirc pump, the floor drain, and the meter change. And then the third was an electrical change. When the IT came in, they added electrical conduit and boxes with pull strings for some added data and cabling for the space. So that's what those 3 components are made up of. And then in this change order, we changed the format so that you could see the start of the construction at the 701-500, the first deduct making its contract amount change order 2 with its change, and so on. So hopefully that answers the tracking question of what the change orders result in each time. And so with this change order, the contract amount would be $719,522.15.
Thank you, Jim. That's what we asked for the last time. Appreciate it.
Yep,
Okay,
no problem.
comments from board members? Any questions for Mr. Jacobs or Chief Massingill?
I have a question. Well, I see the total is $11,014, but then it just says change order number 4, but throughout the packet, it has 5 and 6. So my question is. Go ahead.
So the difference in what you have in your packet is the difference between a change request and a change order. So when the contractor sends us the information, they send it in the form of a question that's a change request. That's what the 5 and 4, and might have been a 6 in there too. But all of those compile to make what we put together is one change order, which is change order number 4 to the contract.
Okay, so at some point we could see change order number 5. It's not what's in here, right?
That's correct. Change order 5 would be a new set of documents. Yep.
Okay, and in looking through, just for instance, on the change order request that's marked number 5 in the packet, but it's for $8,128. On the description, it lists a tax. We're tax exempt, so I'm wondering why there's tax listed on any one of these.
So the contractor, unless you buy it, it's not tax exempt. If a contractor buys it and installs it, they still have to pay the tax.
Well, we don't have to pay the tax. I mean, how can we pay the tax?
The contractor in this case is the consumer, and he has to pay the tax. I think it's legitimately taxable.
That's correct.
Well, it just seems to me that when you're buying for a governmental agency, you just tell them that they're tax exempt. So, I mean, I don't know. I just don't agree with paying tax.
Schools and government entities are tax exempt if they buy it and they install it. But as soon as you go through the contractor route of purchase and install, the contractor still has to pay state sales taxes, which then get built into their cost to the owner. And in this case, they're showing you that whole sequence of all the components that made up their price.
I understand what you're saying. I just don't agree with it. So to date, we are adding 18,000 to this renovation. Do you think that this will be the last change order, or what's next?
Well, there's hopefully one last change order, which will consist of 2 components, potentially 2 deducts, and then a third piece that would be a add from something that we were talking about today, which is some wall condition that was discovered when they took the brick out of the openings to put the windows in. That wall, the existing lintels that are in place, we're exploring that may be the last hopeful add in this case. Right now, we're sitting at 2.5 roughly, or somewhere between 2.5 and 2.6% in change orders. So that's where the percentage sits on the overall project. But we do anticipate, one, to make a final adjustment for what was change order 3, which was a not to exceed number. So we're hoping that we see the cost savings that we were looking for there. And then we've got, again, today, at today's construction progress meeting, they came up with an alternative to some mechanical that will hopefully provide a deduct that washes out this add.
Well, I appreciate your explanation, but when we are facing maybe a 40% decrease in our one portion of our revenue, I mean, to continue to add on is not easy for government. I mean, we have to make some changes in some of the things we do. So I don't want to deprive the renovation. However, I just think that we need to be cautious and careful about adding to the bottom line, whether it's 2% or 1%. We're adding to the bottom line, and like I said, we're facing a reduction. So that's just my opinion as a legislator.
Certainly, and I totally appreciate that. We like it to be 0%.
Yeah, good. Me too. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any more comments or questions? Seeing none, I look for a motion.
Mr. Supervisor, I'll make a motion to approve the change order for change order number 4, renovations on fire station number 1, in the amount of $11,014 as presented.
Mr. Supervisor, I'll support.
Okay, motion by Mr. Steiner, supported by Mr. Clemens. Any more discussion? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Hirschberger, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 6B, approval of IT wiring for Station 1. Chief Massingill.
Yes, so this is the actual wiring itself. Initially, the assumption was that IT Right would do and pull the wiring for us. I think when the construction documents were developed, at least that's my understanding, and if Mr. Jacobs is still on, he can help us with that or help explain that. But IT Right does not do the installation of the IT wires to pull them back into the server room. So we had to go out and get 3 bids for the actual wiring itself. So as part of the electrical bid, it's putting the sleeves in and the conduit in so that we have a space behind the drywall to get it. This would be actually bringing the IT wiring back into the server room. So that I believe Buckeye for the phones and the internet and things like that can make the connections back in that room. We did get a recommendation for, and one of the companies included in here is who IT Right recommended that we get some pricing with because they didn't do the work. So we went out and got the 3 bids, and the lowest being the local bid, La Scala IT.
Okay, any comments or questions for Chief Massingill?
I guess I do have one question. In looking over of course, I'm all for the lowest bidder, so I'm looking at La Scala's IT solutions, and he has assumptions. I'm a little nervous about assumptions. It appears that they're not, if these things play out, then there's going to be an increase, a change order, let's call it again. So I would prefer to have a bid that is a bottom line bid, especially in this situation. I don't know why we couldn't have, I guess maybe someone could explain the assumptions.
I believe I'll take a stab at it. So they're assuming that there was plenum cable, which it is. If it wasn't running through the HVAC duct systems, it wouldn't have been plenum cable. So that assumption was correct. The electrician's having the drops. So you just approved that in the previous change order to have the drops installed. So I think that all of his assumptions are covered either by the change orders or in other areas in the construction document.
Okay, so I'm not saying you're confident, but you're pretty sure that these things are not going to rise up and cost more money.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, any more discussion or comments? It's seeing none, I look for a motion.
Mr. Supervisor, I'll make a motion that we approve the quote by La Scala IT for the network cabling work to be done at Station 1 in the amount of $7,885.44.
I'll support.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Clemens, supported by Mr. Montry, correct?
Yeah, I'd like to see somebody more local, but we'll take it. We'll support that.
Okay, any more discussion? Okay, seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens,
Aye.
Mr. Montry,
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry,
Aye.
Mr. Francis,
Aye.
Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye, Mr. Peroni.
Aye, motion passed 7-0.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
If Mr. Jacobs is still on the phone, he may have an update as well about some electric service. Mr. Jacobs, are you still there?
Yes, I got dropped there, but I'm back on. So with the changeover in our service, Consumers has a charge that they charge directly for. I don't have that number in front of me. Wasn't sure if that was going to be part of tonight's discussion or not, and I'm not in the office, so I don't have that exact figure with me, but I want to say it was right around $11,000. Is that correct, Chief?
I don't have it in front of me as well, but at the very minimum, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you explained it so that they understood it. So,
Yep.
if we have to
So-
circle back to it.
What that is, they charge that up front, and then every 6 months you get a rebate check based on your usage, so it gets paid back. But they don't give you a timeline and when it gets paid back because they don't know, because it depends on your reduced usage by having the upgraded service and with the modifications in LED lighting and other efficiency equipment. So each 6 months, whoever writes that check, so if the fire department writes it, they'll get the rebate check. If the township writes it, the township gets that check. That's the way I understand it. It could take a couple of years to pay back, or it could be 10 years to pay back. But it's a payback method. And then my understanding is you continue to get that check past that, so you could potentially put money into the coffers at some point too. It's not going to be a lot, but it's a way to recover that cost. Typically, either the owner pays it, or if a contractor pays it, they get those rebate checks. So it's usually an owner scenario where they pay that directly as part of their utility bill or direct bill for that.
Any comments or
And if we
questions?
need to,
Go ahead, Mr. Jacobs.
if we need to, I can get the electrician or the consumer's agent to talk to Trudy or whoever to make sure you understand how that system works.
Okay. Yeah, that would be good.
That's my layman's explanation.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
I have a question. When will that be billed to us?
We actually have that information I forwarded over to the chief to look at and start the discussions on. That is the actual invoice and processing the paperwork that needs to be forwarded. It does not hold up construction at the moment, but to get final occupancy, we will have to have that paid and connection made. But the contractor can progress and get everything temporarily wired to keep the station functioning until consumers comes out and makes their final switch over.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, moving on. Chief, you good?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I appreciate it. 8A, vouchers for payment, Ms. Hirschberger.
I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General Fund, $259,639.86. Fire District, $24,856.17. Police Fund, $127,713.65. Park Fund, $1,348.64. Fire Equipment, $244,786.82. Library Fund, $6,160. Sewer O&M Fund, $4,375.91. Trust and Agency, $2,354.25, for a grand total of $671,235.30.
I'll support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, motion passed 7-0. Item 8B, approval of an amendment to ordinance 58, Bedford Township flood damage prevention to update the firm and FIS map reports. Ms. Tinneberry, did you want to take this one?
I will, and I'll start out with a motion. I'd like to move that we adopt the general code ordinance amendment to part 215 flood damage prevention ordinance number 58.
I'll
I'll
second.
support.
For discussion, I'd just like to say that as in Mrs. Kincaid's memo to the board, it to me is very obvious. Her statement, should Bedford Township fail to adopt this FIS and firm by June 19th, 2020 deadline, it will result in immediate suspension from the National Flood Insurance Program. Many of our residents use this National Flood Insurance Program when their home is in a floodplain, and we would be doing a disservice. We take an oath that says that we will support the health, safety, and welfare of our residents, and to me, this categorically falls into that category. So that's why I'm happy to make that motion.
Okay. Any more discussion? Ms. Hirschberger, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye. The motion passed 7-0. Item 8, I guess C, right? Accept with regret the resignation of Paul Francis as treasurer of Bedford Township, effective at midnight on May 31st, 2020. Ms. Tinneberry?
Yes, I want to explain first why I pulled that from the consent agenda. Number one, we're discussing the resignation of a very important person on our board, the treasurer. And I did not want to treat it as one of the committee people that we put on the consent agenda when they resign and just accept it in that fashion. As an elected official, I think that it should be discussed instead of just accepted on the consent agenda. So it wasn't, Paul, that I had any problem with the regret part, accepting with regret. It wasn't that at all. It was, we do regret that you are taking this move, but we understand how important it is to you. The second comment I want to make is this came across in our packet. I remembered the resignation of Michelle Bork. And in that case, we took a different approach. We, accepted resumes and interviewed people. This is a little different because that was several years to go in her term, and this is just a matter of days. However, in talking with this just happened to me in Ida. My boss had to resign, the clerk had to resign, and in talking with the MTA, I found out that as soon as a resignation is accepted, then the deputy is no longer the deputy. The deputy runs with the office holder. And so for us to take a look at Krista as the deputy, once Paul has resigned, she won't be the deputy. Now, MTA also mentioned that until the office is vacant, we really don't have a position to appoint someone until such time as the position is vacant. So their information to me was that it is not appropriate for campaigning to be done at a board meeting, which in essence is Paul's endorsement of Krista. I have no problem with Krista. In fact, I agree with everything that's been said about her. She's an excellent choice. She knows the office very well. She's worked in that department for 18 years. No question about her ability or capability. I'm just going by what the MTA said to me. And at this point, maybe we need to have the attorney chime in as well, because they basically said that it was not a legal action to have in our packet a recommendation, which is campaigning for a certain individual. So just making the statement.
Well, not only that, Nancy, not only having the packet, but no board member on this board can utilize this forum for endorsement. And, last meeting you did that, Mr. Francis. You can't use this platform paid for by the taxpayers to utilize, for endorsing. So we have to be careful with all that. Mr. Goldsmith, did you want to weigh in? Ms. Tinberry asked for you to weigh in on that.
I'd be happy to. What Nancy said, and relaying what the representative from the Michigan Townships Association said regarding the endorsement is accurate. And what you said, Mr. Supervisor, is accurate. We can't use public funds for an endorsement or for campaigning for the appointment of a successor. I will cite Michigan compiled laws 168.370 subsection 3, and to the extent that it may have been stated that you can't appoint a successor tonight, that's inaccurate, because you can. And just let me read this to you. If a township official submits a written resignation from an elective township office for circumstances other than a resignation related to a recall election that specifies a date and time when the resignation is effective, the township board, within 30 days before that effective date and time, may appoint a person to fill the vacancy at the effective date and time of the resignation. So the board tonight, if it so chose, could appoint an individual to fill out the unexpired term of Mr. Francis's treasurer's office. So that can be done. I would also alert the board to another portion or excerpt from Michigan election law that states resignation of township officer. It's MCL, Michigan compiled laws 168.367. Resignation of a township officer shall be in writing, signed by the officer resigning, and addressed to the township board, and shall be delivered to and filed by the township clerk. That has all been done. Mr. Francis penned a letter addressed to the township board. It was by the clerk and expresses his township board to be effective midnight, May 31, 2020. There has been discussion, and I've heard this before from other units of government regarding acceptance of a resignation. Required.
I can't hear Phil.
Phil, you're breaking up, Phil. You're gonna have to go back a little bit.
I think
5 seconds ago.
We've got paper shuffling around. That's what the noise is.
Okay.
So Phil, if you could repeat.
Okay, well then, did you get my recitation of Michigan compiled laws 168.370 subsection 3?
I think that was clear.
Yes.
Okay, that was clear. Okay, then let's go to another excerpt from Michigan election law 168.367, which is entitled Resignation of Township Officer. That section states resignation of a township officer shall be in writing, signed by the officer resigning, and addressed to the township board, and shall be delivered to and filed by the township clerk. That has happened. That has taken place. It's 3B in your packet tonight. It's a letter authored by Mr. Francis, signed by Mr. Francis, directed to the township board, and received and filed by the Bedford Township clerk on April 29th, 2020. So in that letter of resignation, Mr. Francis makes it clear that his resignation will be effective at midnight on May 31st, 2020. Now I want to take you to another section of Michigan election law, which is MCL 168.368, which is entitled Events Creating Vacancy in Township Offices. The township offices become vacant upon the happening of any of the following events: death of the incumbent, his resignation, his removal from office for cause, his ceasing to be a resident of the township where his office is located, and there are others. So I would focus in on his resignation. So at the occurrence of his resignation, the office of treasurer will be vacant, and that will occur on midnight of May 31st. So to me, it matters not whether the township board accepts or doesn't accept his resignation, because I believe Michigan election law is clear that when he sends the letter in, which he did, and specifies the date he will, his resignation takes effect, then that office becomes vacant as of that date and time. Now, the township board, of course, when I read subsection 3 of 168.370, you can make the appointment tonight. You could make it next meeting, because that would be within 30 days of the effective date and time of his resignation. You could, when the office becomes vacant, let me give you an example. If Mr. Francis, because he's resigning, would no longer be, and I don't know whether this is true or not true, but if he was no longer a resident of Bedford Township because he planned his resignation to be effective midnight, May 31st, 2020, the office would then also be vacant. And
Well, let me ask you a quick question, Mr. Francis, are you a resident of Bedford still? You still have an address in Bedford? Can't hear you. Unmute it. We can't hear you.
Am I there?
Yep, now you are.
Yes, I'm a resident.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that wasn't part of it. Mr. Goldsmith, from MTA, they did say that the board does not have to accept the resignation. Just to be clear with you on that, they were very clear about that.
Well, I would say this. I don't always agree with the MTA. I would say this. You're right. You don't have to accept his resignation. But in my legal opinion, based on Michigan election law, that does not make his resignation invalid. And for the reason that I just stated.
Okay, Mr. Steiner?
Question also for Mr. Goldsmith, and going back to what Ms. Tinbury said, that if Mr. Francis resigns, that the deputy's role automatically follows that treasurer. So her position would no longer be valid as a deputy. If that is correct, what happens to her function and role when the treasurer, his resignation takes effect?
I agree with that statement, that upon his resignation being effective, which it would be midnight, May 31st, 2020, based on his letter of resignation, then she would no longer fill the office of deputy treasurer because he has resigned as treasurer. So at that point, let's say June 1st or May 31st at midnight, at that point, you no longer have a treasurer because the office is vacant due to his resignation, and you don't have a deputy treasurer at that point. That is why, in my opinion, it is very important to appoint, as allowed by Michigan election law, to appoint an individual to fill out the remaining term that's being vacated.
Mr. Francis?
If the treasurer resigns, the deputy's position is eliminated also, or vacated also. What that means, if you have no treasurer, you cannot sign any checks for payroll or to pay bills. You have to have a treasurer in order to do that.
So why don't you stay on as treasurer like you ran for the position? Stay on as treasurer and let's finish out your term. I don't understand why.
my letter of resignation kind of laid out what it was. It's a medical issue. I've been advised by U of M medical professionals to resign, give up the position for health reasons. I mentioned that in my letter of resignation, and that's the only reason. I love the position. I'd like to stay. I just am not up to it anymore. And it was alluded to earlier or said earlier that I was endorsing someone. Maybe it's splitting hairs, but I made a recommendation, not an endorsement. I made a recommendation of a person. And I'll stay out of it. I can't vote on this, and I'm allowed to speak to it, but I don't think I should say any more than I've already said. I explained it. My recommendation is in writing, and it's up to the board members, the 6 of you, to make that decision.
Mr. Supervisor.
Ms. Stinneberg, go ahead.
Well, my understanding is that through the bank, there is a duplicate signature, the clerk and deputy clerk and the treasurer and deputy treasurer. And so the clerk and the deputy clerk could sign to pay checks. That's my understanding. And then just one other comment.
I'm sorry.
My other comment is the endorsement, Paul, is the her qualifications. She's worked as the Treasurer's Department 18 years, the last 7.5 as deputy. In my opinion, she possesses the most important attributes. As I read that to MTA, they determined that was an endorsement. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
But
can I respond?
But just about the signatories, I know I'm the deputy clerk in Ida. We have the same system set up, but 4 people can sign. And I know that it used to be that way in Bedford. I'd get signatures on my checks from deputies all the time. So I believe that the bank would accept checks from both clerk and deputy clerk.
Mr. Francis?
I don't believe that to be a fact, Nancy. You have to have someone from the clerk's office, either the clerk or the deputy, and someone from the treasurer's office, either the treasurer or the deputy, sign the checks. You can't have 2 people from the clerk's office, nor can you have 2 people from the treasurer's office. That's a checks and balance system put in place by the state. That's my understanding of it.
I understand that in optimum situations. I was just saying that the possibility the bank would take the check. The other thing I wanted to that I don't know if I said it. I thought I said it in the beginning, but in my mind, we've kind of set a precedent. This board has set a precedent, as in when Michelle had to resign, we interviewed people. To me, it's a shame because we're having an election in 2 months, and there are 2 people running for that office. I think Krista is very well qualified, but since we've set a precedent, I'm just wondering if we go a different route this time. The 45 business days comes up to August 1st. So I mean, that's 2 days before the election.
And let's be honest to the board as well. This resignation's been being planned for a long time. I mean, we've had seasonal worker in the treasurer's department that's been training in Amy's position. So it's not a surprise that your resignation's coming up. It's just surprising to me that we're doing it 2 months before the primary. I think that's kind of a sad position to put this board into, and I think it's not really fair to people running for that position. Mr. Francis?
And what would you do?
I wouldn't.
What's your alternative? What's your alternative to making an appointment as a treasurer?
I'm just
not
saying,
have a treasurer?
I wouldn't have put the board in that position. Okay?
Well, maybe you ought to encounter some medical issues on your own, and maybe you'd change your mind on that.
Well, I understand you've had the medical issues, Paul. You're a friend of mine, and I respect that. I understand that, but also, I mean, you haven't been in the office in 3 months either. So what would be the difference? We want a couple more months to get to the primary. So it's not. I'm just saying.
Can I ask?
Let's say you did, can I respond to that? Let's say you did that. What would the passage of the primary do? It won't fill the office.
At that
Who
point,
wins in the primary doesn't fill the office until November 20.
at that point, you could resign and we could appoint a new treasurer. Let the people decide. At August 4th, August 4th comes around, you resign, and whoever wins, you put him in.
Could I ask our legal attorney, Phil, Mr. Goldsmith, to speak on the issue of whether if both deputy clerk and deputy, I know optimally the checks say treasurer and clerk, but I mean, if the treasurer and the deputy treasurer happen to go on vacation at the same time, or what if they, got the virus and had to be off together? I wonder, the business wouldn't stop. So I'm wondering if Mr. Goldsmith would comment on whether I know you have to have a treasurer for the long haul, but for 2 months, is it possible to go without a treasurer? And we could appoint Krista as the head person in the treasurer's department, although she is right now too.
Well, let me answer that question. First of all, I would say this: in an emergency situation, if the treasurer or the deputy treasurer was not available, then checks could be signed by 2 individuals, and one of which would be our clerk, and the other of which might be the supervisor. It might be another individual in the clerk's office. So that could be done on an emergency basis. But in terms of going without a treasurer, I just want to make it clear, whether it happens tonight, whether it happens next meeting, I want the board to appoint, Mr. Francis is firm in his decision to resign, and he stated why, and we have to honor that. That creates a vacancy in office. So my advice is to appoint a successor prior to midnight on May 31st. If we don't do that, then June 1, there's a 45-day period where the Monroe County Election Commission could appoint a successor. The Monroe County Election Commission is comprised of Sharon LeMasters, who's the county clerk, Kay Sissing, who is the county treasurer, and Chief Probate Judge Cheryl Lohmeyer. So you probably want to make the appointment on your own and not allow the County Election Commission to make that appointment. And then if they don't make an appointment, pursuant to statute, the county clerk, it's mandatory, shall call a special election. And talk about being on the ridiculous side, would we want to run a special election at the same time we're running a regular election? Because that special election would be in November. I talked to Sharon LeMasters today, and she wouldn't let that happen. She would convene the County Election Commission. The County Election Commission would appoint a treasurer for Bedford Township, and then you would lose control, and you shouldn't lose control. This is your community. You've been elected by the folks in Bedford to represent them. You need to maintain that control and appoint an appropriate person if Mr. Francis is going to remain firm in his resignation. And to get back to acceptance, the MTA is right. You don't have to accept it, but I believe that is of no legal significance because of the way the election law is drafted. So.
No, the way they explained it to me, you don't accept it, but he stays, he continues to get paid. I mean, let's ask Mr. Francis, are you willing to stay on till August 4th as treasurer?
May I respond?
Yep.
No, I'm not.
Okay, that just, when we were talking about it, it's just a question.
Okay, so if you refuse to accept my resignation and I refuse to serve, you talk about being fiscally responsible. Why in the world would you vote to pay a salary to someone that's not doing the work for any length of time? That doesn't make any economic sense to me at all, to take that. You know, you're telling me that I'm hearing what you're saying, some of you, that this is a political decision and I'm playing games. That's not the case, and I resent that. I gave you what my reason is. You want to talk to my physicians, you can get a letter from them if that's what you need. But you're implying that I'm playing politics with this issue, and I resent that because I am not. Those of you that have known me a long time know that I'm anything but a politician.
Paul, I was not playing politics. I'm saying we set a precedent in the past. I respectfully request to hear from the other 4 board members. I mean, doesn't anyone have any comment or anything to say on this issue?
I mean, I'll speak. I mean, I don't have much to add, I guess. I talked to Mr. Francis about this before the meeting, and I'd already told him like I don't know that, and I don't know that anybody feels a certain kind of way about necessarily Krista, but I agree with Mr. Peroni that I agree that it's unfortunate, and I feel that it's I don't like the board being put in the situation if that would have been avoidable. Is about what I had told him. My views were that it kind of is a unfortunate situation to put the board in.
Mr. Francis, before you were sick, were you planning on leaving your position early at all? Before your...
I had thought about it, but I hadn't come to any decision, no.
Okay.
Can I chime in?
Members have any thoughts or comments?
I do.
Okay, Ms. Hirschberger.
This is a medical issue, and I think we should accept Paul's resignation. That part, no argument. As far as a treasurer, we have tax bills coming out very soon. We need someone in there to do tax bills. We already know Krista can do it. I guess I'm just wondering, we don't have time to go interview people and find someone else when we already have someone there that can do the job and get the tax bills out and do what this community needs. So I don't understand the argument right now. Even if we put her in there right now, this won't affect the election. It doesn't say incumbent on our ballots. It'll still have just the 2 names. They're still going to run on their own. And we need somebody in there right now who's competent, can get the work done, can get these tax bills out there.
Well, if Mr. Francis resigned and we waited the 45 days, we could hire Krista as an employee to run and do all that stuff. The problem is we have to, by law, put a treasurer in within 45 days. That's the position we're put in. Do I feel like we should go out and take applications? Absolutely not. It's too late in the game for that. You have a primary coming. You guys are swamped as it is. You know, it's a tough situation we're put in. That's the bottom line.
So Nancy had asked, I'll weigh in. To me, there are 3 prongs here that we're really talking about when push comes to shove. A is you have the resignation, which has been said is for health issues. It's a no-brainer. We have to accept that. 2, we have the issue of we do have to have statutorily a treasurer, given the timing of the year, our budget issues, and yes, the upcoming election in August, or primary, I should say. It's not ideal timing. I think we have 2 sub-issues that we have to break this down to. The first is, and I'll speak as candidly as I can, I'm friends with both candidates running for the treasurer's office. And so I get politically how sensitive this decision is. My elected job is as a trustee. As a trustee, my job is to watch out for my neighbors. 90% of my neighbors right now don't care the name of the person sitting in the treasurer's seat. They want the job done. And so it is a very difficult situation because without getting into politics, there are very up and down sides to this timing. But at the same time, I'm struggling with my fundamental role, and the reason why I'm even on this call or video conference to begin with is as a trustee. And I have to fall back as a trustee. What is my responsibility to the residents of this community? And that fundamental responsibility is to see to it that our government operates as seamlessly and as flawlessly as possible. And so I think we all should be thinking about that key question as we individually jump through the hoops here. It's a bad situation, and I don't think it was done with intent. I wish that there was an alternative, because there's no way this is going to end up well for multiple people.
Mr. Supervisor.
Mr. Steiner?
And one of the things, as I asked earlier, for clarification from Mr. Goldsmith, based on some comments from Ms. Tinvery and stating about how the deputy's role would be eliminated by the resignation of the treasurer. And I was going really toward what Trudy was saying about the responsibilities of that department. So when Mr. Francis' resignation takes effect, we effectively have no one in that department that also, not to mention doing the job, no one has the legal responsibilities of the treasurer's department at that point. And there's, of course, certain statutes that must be followed and regulations by law. So I think Mr. Goldsmith really helped clarify that for me, that we do need to move forward. We do need to put someone in that position. I too, like Mr. Clements said, you know, I'm friends with both of the people that would be running for that role. And it's a difficult decision how to handle this whole thing. But as a trustee, yes, we need to take action on what's before us. And the one other thing I will say, when it comes to the actual timing and resignation, you know, there's certain things that you can ask Mr. Francis about timing and resignation, but if Mr. Francis states there's a medical issue behind this, he's even said he could get a letter from his physician. But I will tell you one thing, that technically that's a HIPAA violation to even ask Mr. Francis why and what the medical situation is. He said he's got a medical issue, which is the timing behind this resignation. And to me, that settles it right there. We can't go beyond what HIPAA is telling us there. So I think we're falling in lines of, we need to move forward, and we need to get this department wrapped up, get it tight, and get our tax bills out and get the department running smoothly and appropriately as quickly as possible.
Okay, any more discussion? Okay, seeing none, I look for a motion to accept the resignation.
Mr. Supervisor, I make the motion to accept the resignation of Mr. Francis effective at midnight, May 30th, 2020.
31st.
Or I'm sorry, May 31st, 2020.
Do I have a support?
Support.
Okay, motion and by Mr. Steiner, supported by Mr. Hirschberger. Any more discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye. Mr. Francis, you know, we've enjoyed working together for the past few years. After my comments last meeting, I appreciate you, the work you've done. I've enjoyed working with you. You've done a great job. But this situation, you know, it was unfortunate, you know, so, you know, I have things I felt like I wanted to say, and I said them. Let's move on. So let's move on to 8C, appointment of a township treasurer, effective June 1, 2020. Mr. Francis?
Well, I prepared the memo that is item 8C on the agenda tonight. I don't intend to read it. You've had it there. It's a recommendation by me to appoint a certain individual as the treasurer effective June 1st. That's
Okay.
my recommendation. I can't make a motion on it and won't, but that's the recommendation and the reason that I presented that.
Okay, board members, any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I look for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Deputy Treasurer Ms. Jandasek as treasurer effective June 1st, 2020, due to the resignation of Mr. Francis.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a support?
A second.
Okay, motion in support of Mr. Steiner. Discussion?
I have a question of, I guess it would be Phil. Does she have to appoint a deputy then?
She has to fill out the unexpired term vacated by Mr. Francis. Normally, the appointment of a deputy is statutory. I was combining two words there. To be absolutely positively sure, I want to look at that. So I don't want to give you incorrect information. Normally, a treasurer needs to appoint a deputy by statute. So I need to look at that to give you a 100% correct answer. I'm sorry, Nancy, that I couldn't provide that now.
No, that's okay. I mean, I think it's going to be an ongoing discussion. My second question is, do we, well, I guess we could do it at the next board meeting, but we need to be thinking about the salary, and will she be paid as the treasurer? And will we have to hire another person into that department? I think that we need to contemplate all those things before the next meeting so that we're on the same page in terms of compensation.
Mr. Supervisor?
Mr. Steiner?
Ms. Timbery, I don't think we have any say on compensation for those people assuming those roles. Those are elected positions, and this board has voted on the salaries of those elected positions.
But she would not be an elected treasurer. She would be an appointed treasurer, and it's not required. Again, in my position in Ida, the clerk resigned. She moved out of the township. She resigned. I no longer was clerk. The woman that they appointed became the clerk, and she's appointed until the election, and she swore me in as deputy. So there's no guarantee that the appointed person has the same salary. I'm not saying if she does the job, she shouldn't get it. I'm just saying there are things that we need to consider, and I think the board needs to address.
Mr. Goldsmith, could you weigh in on that?
I'm going to have to take a look at it. It could boil down to a compensation commission issue, whether or not the the treasurer is elected or appointed may not matter because the treasurer's salary has been set by the compensation commission and accepted by the board. So I think that might be moot, but I'll check. I want to make 100% sure, so I'll check on that.
Yeah, if you could clarify that, because that's what I was thinking, because it was set by the compensation committee and voted on by position, not by appointment or elected.
I just wanted to say that when it happened with the clerk, that the salary stayed, but the deputy salary was made by the board.
there's no question that the board, if a deputy were appointed, there's no question that the board would decide that issue. You're absolutely correct, Trudy.
Right, but the clerk salary stayed the same, only the deputies was voted on.
And if I had to give an answer tonight, that's what I would say, because I believe that issue's been settled by the Compensation Commission. But I'll double check to make sure.
Trudy, are you talking about back in 2000? Is that the time you were talking about the clerk's salary?
2012.
I mean, that's what I'm sorry. That's what I meant, 12. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, statutorily, the treasurer and the clerk have to have a deputy.
Correct.
You're right. That's absolutely correct.
So I would assume she has to appoint a deputy. Now, the board would decide if we want to fill in one of the positions that could
Correct.
fill in if she moves somebody in. If she appoints one of the people that are in the office. Okay, so. Any more discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please, Ms. Hirschberger?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Sounds like somebody's dryer's going.
I didn't hear Mr. Montry. Is he still here?
Mr. Montry, are you on mute?
Yeah, I was on mute. I said aye.
Okay, sorry. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Somebody's got something going on in their background.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
somebody else go on mute.
I think that's Bob's stomach. I'm sorry.
Sounds like somebody's riding a horse. Okay, moving on to 8D, discussion of the Bedford Township Board and Administrative Policies Manual. Ms. Tinneberry.
Yeah, I brought this up because, well, I'm not resigning, but I'm also not running. April 21st came and passed, and my name is not going to be on any ballot. Hallelujah, celebrate. So I've been waiting for a long time for this board policy to be addressed. Mr. Francis took it over a while ago, and he made some adaptations, and this board, I'm not sure about Craig, but the other remaining 6 members have had several committee of the whole meetings discussing this. I read an email tonight that some of the things in this policy should be postponed, but I'm not going to be very happy if this board doesn't address the issue of this policy. I want this really settled before November 4th, please, or November 3rd. We've been dealing with this for many years now. There is really no reason. This policy was formulated off of a template from the Michigan Townships Association. I've worked hard on it. Paul Francis has worked hard on it. We had a committee of Larry Odell, Rick Steiner's worked hard on it, Rick and myself, several years ago. And so I'm just asking the board, you've had plenty of time to read it, to look over it. I'm not asking that you just automatically approve it as is. If you have changes, please make those known to me tonight. I will go back and make the alterations, and we'll be able to put the final draft in the packet for the next meeting. If you see no problems, which we've discussed all of this many times before, if you see no problems, then if we can adopt it tonight as is. I'm begging you.
Ms. Hirschberger.
Sorry, Nancy, I found lots of things.
Okay, great, no problem. I can make the changes. Can you name them or?
There's quite a few, but I'll go through it if you'd like,
Okay, I'd like.
unless someone else has comments before that.
I mean, I have some things I was gonna discuss, but go ahead. Go ahead.
On 1.4, since the employees are covered under our policy manual, should we take off employees on that part and just leave it volunteers?
Fine. I'm all good with that. If anybody objects, please speak up.
Trudy, you mean 2.14, correct?
I mean 1.4.
Okay.
Where it says employees and volunteers.
Mr. Francis?
I think he's muted.
Mr. Clemens?
Nancy, I had only two. 5.16 talks about time cards. And I apologize, do township personnel use time cards?
Yes.
Okay, the only other one I had was 8.7 is keys. A lot of us have the electronic key fobs, so it would seem like to me that everywhere you word the word keys, you would also want to say or electronic opening device or some type of language to that effect.
We need both, TC. That was I have a whole bunch of other comments, but that was one of them that we should put keys are under the supervisor, the key fobs are under the clerk.
Okay,
When you say
I just want
fob,
to make
you're
sure we
talking
address
about the
that.
badge?
Yes.
So the keys are under the supervisor and the key fob is under the clerk.
Correct. They used to be the badges with the pictures, but we went to key fobs, they were cheaper.
Okay, is that FOB?
Yes.
Okay, because I didn't know you had those, Trudy. We still have the badges.
Yeah, I've just been replacing them as the badges are breaking.
Okay.
That's
Okay,
all I
I'm
have.
ready. Thanks, TC.
So there's a lot of other places that I'm wondering if maybe we should have clerk and treasurer and supervisor rather than putting the supervisor in all those locations. Such as 2.15, 2.16.
2.15?
Correct.
I just have 2.1.
Keep going, Nancy. Page 4.
Oh.
2.15, actually.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
Yeah, not 2.1.5, 2.15.
Well, the reason if, Rick can correct me if I'm wrong, but as we discussed it as a committee, the reason we put supervisor was not to give any control or power. And at that time, a different supervisor was in office, so I don't think it has anything to do with the personality of the supervisor. But the clerk has, you know, as well as I do, numerous, not just one numerous, but numerous jobs. And so we were looking for a way to alleviate the responsibility, or not responsibility actually, but the power, the responsibilities of the clerk, I will say. And so to lighten the load. Go ahead, Greg.
We decided the clerk's office due to the numerous responsibilities.
I was just thinking that if they had a problem with the supervisor, they'd want to go to someone else. If they had a problem with the treasurer, then they'd have the other two to go to. If one of them wasn't there, they'd have another one to go to. That was my reasoning behind that.
Well, it doesn't matter to me. It's, but the problem is, like I said, you know, this clerk has much to do. I think maybe, what about the supervisor and the treasurer? Breaking it up, or do you want the clerk in there? I'll put that down.
You know what, we've done during my regular employment where you can use or You could, in some case you say or designee, but in this case we could say or other full-time elected official. Basically if somebody doesn't feel comfortable, they could go to another full-time elected official. So that means they could go to either or. Because who knows, maybe they're not comfortable with 2 people. Maybe they think 2 people are ganging up on them.
So, and do you have the numbers where you'd like to put supervisor, clerk, and treasurer?
I was just looking at 2.15 and 2.16.
Okay.
There you go. You want to go with the 2 or one of the other full-time elected officials?
Just
I
something so they.
would put all 3 of them on there.
TC's got something there.
I was just gonna say, I liked exactly the way you had it, one of the other 2 full-time officials.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because I think by and large, the supervisor's office designates when they're gone, who's going to fill in their absence anyway.
Okay, I got that.
Okay, 2.17, where it says leave a written notice to the member at their place of residence. Could we replace that with just email?
Okay. Yeah, see how old this is?
Yes.
Under 2.18, Nancy, it should be or clerk for preparing the agenda. Because right now Trudy prepares the agenda. And her.
I know. That's one more thing you're making the clerk do that
I'm not making
MTA
it
says
good.
it's
They've
supervisor.
done it for years and they've continued to do it and it works. They're the record holders.
Okay.
I'm just saying I would put both of them in there.
Okay, did that.
Okay, then under that same one, if you go further, it talks about 6 days.
Yeah, we shortened that.
Okay.
So if people are adding things 6 days prior, there's no way I'm going to have the agenda done 6 days prior to give out to board members.
How many days?
I was thinking changing that to 7 and 6.
Okay.
And then that's when my noon on that day takes place, where you have to have it to me by noon.
Nancy, something under emergency repairs. $1,500 for emergency repairs isn't enough.
Wait, where's that?
Under, I lost my 2.1. It's got under there $1,500 for emergency repairs. Typically when you have an emergency, usually, it's a broken water line or something, like the last one was the parking lot had a broken water line in the parking lot. I mean, let me find out where it is. So, I mean, if you could bump that, it's 8.2 emergency repairs.
Oh, we're jumping way ahead.
Yeah, why don't we get
Let's
in
go.
order here?
Let's keep Trudy's sequence going. If somebody's got one in between, let's do it.
Go ahead, Trudy.
Okay, 2.25, board member conflict of interest. We as a board talked about this at one point where we weren't going to make them leave the room. They could stay in the room and listen to the debate. They just couldn't vote. So do we want to remove? I'm sorry.
I think it's parliamentary procedure. It's Robert's Rules of Order that says they need to relieve the room. You could ask Paul or Phil about that, but that's where that comes from.
Phil, can you weigh in on that?
Nancy's correct. And if they're going to recuse themselves because of a conflict of interest, to remove all appearances of impropriety, they should remove themselves from the room.
Okay.
Yeah, because that person, we took it in our meetings, that person could, try to influence through facial or whatever motions that they could get to somebody.
Okay, I just thought they could go and sit in the audience or something, but wouldn't be able to be up
Yeah,
voting.
we've pretty much had people leave the room on their own accord automatically anyway.
Yeah. Again, 3.5, reporting improper actions, we should probably make it the 3.
Instead of department
So
heads.
they could go to any one of the elected.
Okay, okay. All right.
And then financial relationships under 3.14. That was a big discussion for this board in one of our COW meetings.
Okay.
We were gonna make it $500 because if we have a relationship with another business and it's under 500, well, it was at $25, so we couldn't do business with anyone who was doing business with the township if it was $25 or more.
Wait, say that again.
This is for disclosure
Like
of personal business transactions. So if the person who's doing our cutting, say for noxious weeds or something, if they're our company and we pay them over $25, we have to say, that's my lawn company. And I know we had talked about making it a little higher. I don't know how the other members feel about that, but I wanted to bring it to the attention while we're talking
I
about it.
have a quick comment. Trudy, we're not going to be able to approve this tonight with all these changes. Why don't we table this and everybody email Nancy all the changes, and then we could table it to the next board meeting. We could be going on for another 45 minutes, unless the board wants to. We could go on for another 45 minutes, and we're not going to be able to approve it tonight anyways.
Well, this is it, Paul. Emailing me the requested changes. I don't have board approval to make those changes. Right now, if somebody objects, I mean, I can't just make the changes. That's why we had the committee of 3 people.
But if you would be presenting an edited version of this document and then, like, I don't know, I feel like there'd be more time.
Okay, all right, that's fine, but this is where we've been for many years. We keep putting it off and making changes. This is it, you know, I can take the changes and then we'll get back together and I'll have to mention the changes. You've had this since you got your packet. You could have emailed me your suggestions then, but
Well,
okay.
and that's, in all fairness, I don't have Trudy's, so say I have no amendments, I don't have Trudy's amendments to look at. So if everything was adjusted, then I would be able to look at a document based off of all the adjustments, and then I could say yay or nay or whatever if we have trouble with. I would say put that in a motion, Paul, to put it on the next meeting then for Nancy's sake.
Nancy's gonna put it on the next agenda. This thing's been sitting in the treasurer's lap for 3.5 years, and we need to get the daggum thing done. So I'm sure it'll be on the next agenda.
All right.
Yeah, well, I will take your comments if you email them to me. Excuse me, Paul. I will take your comments. I will make the changes and then get it back to you. Hopefully before the packets come out. I may just email it back to all of you.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yeah.
Since Nancy, she's basically right about, there was a committee at one time. So how about if I make a motion, sort of 2-pronged here, that all board members shall send any requested changes of the policy to Nancy, and this will be put then on the next board meeting agenda with all the changes that have been sent to Nancy.
We have a motion on the floor.
I second that. I support it.
Okay, supported Ms. Tinnevelli. Any discussion?
One quick thing is, Nancy, if there's more than one suggestion in the same category that is not the same suggestion, probably need to put both of them down or whatever, so we make sure that we come to a final agreement.
Okay,
And like you said, get it done.
thank you.
Okay, Mr. Francis?
Yeah,
Well, you had mentioned that it had been laying in the treasurer's lap for the last 3.5 years. That's true. Maybe with tonight's discussion, you can see why. We just couldn't agree to establish it.
Okay. Any
Now,
more
I agree, it
I'll
should have been
defend
done,
Paul.
it should have been done years ago, but the reason it hadn't been done is we couldn't get people to come. We'd set up meetings and some people wouldn't show up. It just went on and on. It's way too long. Nancy's point is correct. We need to get this done.
We don't need to get into, I'm just saying, I've been asking you for the last year, probably about 15 times to get this on the agenda, it gets date set and it never happened. So
All right, let's call the
let's
question.
move on, we'll get it on the next agenda and we'll get
Call
it
the
done.
question.
What's that, Mr. Steiner?
Let's call the question.
Yeah, let's move forward. So can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Okay, moving on to 8E, approval to repair the firefighter memorial lights by GLIC Electric for $1,777. Okay, so the firefighters memorial out front. Okay, the lights were never hooked back up. Okay, are you guys done moving your papers? So the lights were never hooked back up. And basically the conduit in the old building is there, but it was never hooked back up. So we don't know where the conduit is. We know it goes towards the parking lot. So basically you'd have to trench new conduit to hook the lights up so the firefighters memorial can be have lights at night. I tried putting solar lights on, but it's such a shady area, they don't work at night. They don't just get the sunlight that they need. So you see there's two parts to it, and I don't think we should do the second part. I think that's too high of a cost. But the second part, there's two parts there. One's for $1,777, and the other's to have lights at the township sign. I didn't ask for a quote for that. For some reason, when Mr. Pryor did it, we got both quotes, and that's okay. I just think I'm looking to do the firefighters memorial now. I think at the sign, that's something, if we do want lights there, we could put LED lights there and they probably work because it's an open area. It gets plenty of sun. So if the board, and this was all talked about and done before we had this coronavirus thing, and you know, things have gotten very tight for us. So if it's something the board wants to push off for a year, we can, or we could get it done. Any comments, questions, Ms. Tinneberry?
I would like to push it off until after our budget workshop, because as it was told to me, we could be facing 40% to 50% reduction in our state shared revenues. So, I mean, I think if it's gone this long, I mean, I'd like to see it lit, but I think if it's gone this long, we should wait till after we've decided what cuts are going to make in the budget.
Mr. Clemens?
I echo Nancy's thoughts, but also thought this might be a project where we could get with the fire department auxiliary program to see if there's some type of shared potential for getting this done, or is it a project they could take on completely?
I'm going to appoint you to look into that.
Deal.
Mr. Francis?
I got a question on the quotation that we do have in the packet. It shows two pieces. One is to light the firefighters memorial, and the second one is to lights for the main entrance sign. But yet down below that, there's a scope of work for the firefighters memorial. And the second one is also entitled scope of work for firefighters memorial. Which one's which? Which one goes with the 1,700 and which one goes with the 3,200?
The first one's for the 1,700.
That's what I would assume too, but it's kind of unclear.
Yeah, it is. What's the board's pleasure? Do we want to move forward with this, or you want to table it and have Mr. Clemens look into the auxiliary?
I'll make a motion. I'd like to table the quote until we're finished with our budget workshops.
Second.
Okay, motion and supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion.
One other thing. I thank you, Paul Francis, for bringing that up. That was my question too, but also the quote's dated February 17th. Is this a 30-day quote, or, I mean, we're past the 30 days?
We've talked to them. Obviously, we all know we've had some issues and things are backed up, so, yeah, we've looked into this 6 months ago and been putting it out for bid. We were only able to obtain one bidder. We couldn't get a few other companies to bid on it because work was so crazy and people were so busy. So that's why we only have actual one quote in front of us. So
Yeah,
I agree. We have a motion and support on the floor. Any more discussion?
One last question, Mr. Peroni, is it just, or commented, if you look at the second where it says scope of work for firefighter memorial, look at line number 1. That talks, we're installing the PVC conduit from the firefighter memorial to the south main entrance. So that clarifies for sure that second piece is the south entrance, not the memorial itself.
Okay.
I would, the only other thing I would add is, yeah, I think we'd all love to have this done just under certain circumstances, but I would commend you for bringing this to our attention. I don't, like you said, how long has it been that this has not been lit up? I'd love to see that, like all lit up under, when we're getting, it's hard to spend $2,000 on decorative lights right now, but like under normal conditions, yeah, I think it'd be great to have.
Well, like I said, I tried the LED option first at $65, and they didn't work because of how shady that area is. So I think it's important to have it lit up. I think it means a lot to all of us and the community and everything the firefighters do. So I think at some point we need to get the job done.
Sure.
With that, would you take the roll, Ms. Hirschberger?
Ms. Tineberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 8F, discussion regarding Township Hall personnel. Mr. Montry?
Yeah, so I've had a handful of residents reach out to me and ask about what's going on at Township Hall. Is it open? And I thought that it was. I thought there was at least, there'd be somebody at the window, something, and I'm getting that that's not the case. And so I just wanted to bring this to the board. I have, like I said, I have residents asking me, and I don't necessarily know if there was ever an official decision made. And I thought it was prudent to bring this to the board and maybe have some discussion around that. What do we want? Do we want, like, personally, I would think there should always be somebody at the very least at that window. Just for, I mean, I sit in that parking lot every once in a while toward the end of the day, just in my work day, because I'm on a conference call nowadays almost every day at the end of the work day. So I just pull in there before I go home and wrap my day up. And I've had different people come through and just pull their car up to me and ask, after I watched them, they went through the drive-through and they just they end up circling back out and they just are a little lost. And I would think it would, like I said, at the very least, personally, I would think we should have someone at the very least at that window. And like I said, I open that up to the board, but I feel like we should have a decision made on exactly what do we want in that regard.
Ms. Hirschberger?
They may be circling because they're looking for our drop slot. We get a lot of questions on where the drop slot is. People don't know we have one by the drive-up window. So that might be circling.
Exactly. Be like that we don't have there's not someone at that window to tell them, yeah, it's right there. And there should be. Because I agree. I think that is exactly what they're doing. Because I know at the beginning of this, I paid my sewer bill, and it took me half a second to look around and, oh yeah, like I'm looking for the drop slot and realize I kind of already almost went past it.
Right. I mean, we could put a sign up that says the drop box is right there, or maybe some kind of a metal tag above it that says drop slot. I don't,
That's a discussion we gotta have tonight too. You know, they're looking to reopen some things May 15th. You know, we have on here discussion of putting up temporary, or permanent plexiglass inside the township hall. You know, on a daily, I mean, I don't know how often the deputy treasurer is handling, paperwork that's coming through the window. But personally, I'm taking a decent amount of phone calls, from the treasurer's department because there's nobody there, Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. It's kind of hit or miss when somebody's there. Today I received 2 calls. I don't think anybody was there today in the treasurer's department. The treasurer's department's a critical function. The Trudy's office, the clerk's department's a critical function. Assessing they're working. You know, the building department's coming back May 7th because they're changing residential and commercial developments. So they'll be coming back to work. So that's a discussion we got to have because I'm getting a lot of calls about mosquito dunks. People can't get mosquito dunks right now. Ms. Sanberry?
Well, I thought we voted to close the township hall for 2 days for disinfectant, and then everybody was going to be back to work. What happened to that?
Well, you got to keep in mind, a lot of people can't come back because they're not considered a critical department. So like the building department is not considered, a critical, I'm probably saying the wrong word, critical. What's the word?
Essential.
Essential. The building department's not essential right now, so they can't be in the building.
The
Planning,
treasurer's department is.
yes,
The
they should
treasurer's
be there.
department.
That's why I'm saying they should be there. Somebody should be there. And like Mr. Montri's saying, that window should be open, so people can pay their bills and somebody can answer phone calls. That's another thing. I talked to Ms. Hirschberger today. We got to change the phone tree. It is changed. So, I mean, I was receiving a number of calls for all these departments that, you know, I can't answer the questions. So I'm glad it's changed and that'll alleviate some of that. But that's something the board needs to decide. Do we want to open that window? Do we want to bring back one of the people or make sure Chris is there from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, so somebody's in there to answer it? Because you can't have it open if nobody's there. But the board needs to decide. I mean, right now, I think the concern is why the window's not open is obviously we have the coronavirus and we're worried about transmission from the disease coming in to the township hall. And then, you know, you get a couple of important people sick and we're, you know, in trouble. That's something the board needs to decide. Can we put things in place precaution wise to keep it safe and keep it open?
Well, I thought with gloves and masks and disinfectant, I mean, we have Lysol spray. I thought that was discussed when we decided about disinfecting why were we disinfecting the township if nobody was going to be in there to work? I don't understand that, but.
Keep in mind, we voted to disinfect the township before the governor created the stay-at-home order and a state of an emergency. So we were planning ahead. We thought our employees were going to be there, so we took action to keep our employees safe. So if we would have known it had been closed, we probably wouldn't have done that.
Well, but the treasurer's department is essential.
Correct.
And we can't direct the deputy treasurer to be there, but we can certainly ask Paul to have someone in there on a daily basis. Maybe not the same person. I don't know, but we need to have someone in there. Because I've had calls too from people wanting to know how they're supposed to do business.
Well, what is happening in the treasurer's department? What is happening with the 2 employees outside of the deputy? Are they working? Did we decide, did you talk to them, Mr. Francis? Are they furloughing? Are they going with the Federal CARES Act? Can you update us with what's going on? Because I heard Amy was in a couple days this week, or one of your employees was in a couple days this week, for a couple hours doing some stuff. So can you give us an update?
Well, that's true that she was called in for working on sewer bills. That's true. She and Cindy are both taking sick time rather than a layoff or furlough, as you recall. I'm just confused. Does the governor allow a governmental office to be open?
Yes.
Who said yes?
You're essential. That's an
If
essential
you're,
part of the,
if you're essential, you can be there, yes. That's why I have to be there and my department's there. That's why Krista's been there. The Dropbox we've been using has been fine. Like I said, when people drop stuff in there, it's either sitting long enough that the virus is dead because it's paper, or we're spraying it before we're touching it. And that was our concern with the window, is the virus getting in. And if Krista gets sick and gives it to me and I give it to Nancy, we're really in trouble. So
That's correct.
Well, I mean, how is
that
stuff
was the
coming,
issue
how
with
is
the
stuff
window.
coming in? How is stuff coming in now, though? It's coming in through the Dropbox. Someone's picking it up.
We're
What's the difference of that?
disinfecting before it's touched.
Why don't you just wear like nitrile gloves?
We're what?
Nitrile gloves? Latex gloves.
They're
Latex
latex.
gloves. But
Well, that doesn't kill the virus. It might kill, it might keep it off that person's hand.
But it's gonna
But-
transfer it.
but they'd
Correct.
be able to sanitize or whatever
Well,
with when
I
it
can
as
tell
it
you
comes
this
in,
from,
be able to have someone at the window.
I can tell
Right,
you
you
this.
just have to you'd have to sanitize the whole area after every single customer.
I can tell you this, that I've received a number of calls for the treasurer's department, and a lot of people are confused as to where to bring their bill, how to pay their bill. You know, somebody should be there answering the phone at a minimum, okay? That way it's on the phone tree and they can talk to somebody and they can explain it. You know, but as far as the drive-through being open, I mean, technically, the government center could be open right now with it being essential.
Mhm.
You know, I think at minimum, if the board was gonna open up the drive-through, are you taking a risk? You know, very little. You know, with having that drive-through open up and dealing with papers and transferring items back and forth. I don't know how much transferring back and forth goes on. But you know, I don't know if you could take the items in and set them and then process them, you know, at the end of the day. I don't know. I mean, you guys are the ones that deal with the drive-through, not me. So that's why I've said whatever you feel safe with, you know what I mean? But ultimately, we're 2.5 months into this, and you know, it's getting ready to reopen potentially May 15th, correct? Is that, you know, for certain things. So, I mean, we have to plan for a slight reopen soon. You know,
Well, I would think right now it's Paul Francis's call. It's his department.
Well, this board, I think this board to make a decision with someone, whether we have somebody at the window or not, I think would still be a board decision, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yes, the only employees that we don't have any responsibility for are the deputy treasurer and the deputy clerk. So I believe that we are responsible to the public, and though we have to be careful and cautious regarding this virus, there are ways that we can do that, and someone has to come into work.
Well, we'd have to get the cleaning products too, which are still hard to get a hold of, unless Craig has some ties.
Well, I do, but that might go to our conflict of interest clause. You have to talk to Mr. Goldsmith. I got him for days, though. I'll tell you that.
Mr.
Well, I
Cronin?
can tell you this, our fire department has really stepped up. They're there on a daily basis, taking temperatures. Face mask if we need them to wear at Township Hall. There's, I know that Ms. Hirschberger's got 2 or 3 1,000 roll sanitizing wipes, correct, Ms. Hirschberger, that we ordered prior to this?
We ordered them, but they got canceled.
I was gonna say those
They
are the
said
hard
they were
ones.
out of
That's
stock.
the hard one to get.
So, I mean, the only thing you'd have to get is some stuff to be able to sanitize.
Which is already happening if they're taking them through the Dropbox, though. Whatever they're doing, they're already doing it.
Krista bought Lysol for personal and brought it in and started spraying them.
Mr. Peroni?
Mr. Steiner?
Get it.
I was actually going to wait till we got into the next item G, but I'm going to go ahead and say, that's the other thing we've got to be prepared for when we do open the doors in that township hall. And I know you're already doing some work. I applaud you for it, but we have to make sure when it comes to the social distancing and everything else, when that door opens, that I was into a place the other day and they actually had X marks taped on the floor. So when somebody walks in, here's the spacing. You stop at this point until the next point opens, and then the next point opens. And that way we can help guarantee people are staying at least 6 feet apart before they can even approach one of our windows that we're talking about putting up the plexiglass. The other thing is, if we don't have the equipment, we do need the PPE. We have to get the people gloves. If they would need to wear gloves, if they're handling paperwork and transactional items, hand to hand, they need to have that, plus any kind of the cleaning wipes or sprays or anything else that we can get our hands on. If we can't get our hands on that, then I don't know how we can open it, even if the order's lifted.
Well, keep in mind, we can always continue to use the drive-through for a lot of the stuff for assessing and clerks and treasurers. You can continue to use the drive-through, and we can make it to where the doors are closed by appointment only. So if somebody's coming in for a passport, it's only one at a time. You wait in your car outside and make it by appointment only for the planning. And functions for the building department can be done through the drive. I mean, we can be very safe. We don't have to leave the doors full wide open and let 50
You could put a
people.
note on.
Well, appointment only. If you have an appointment you need with the treasurer's department, you call this number and you make an appointment. So we can get strategic on that. But I think we can. Is Chief Massingill on still?
Yes, sir.
Chief, what items can we get a hold of through? I mean, do you have latex gloves and or not latex, nitrile gloves or whatever Mr. Montreat called them? Do you have enough face masks for the employees? Are you still checking temperatures? Can we get a hold of disinfectants? I mean, what do you would know? I mean, you're dealing with it on a daily basis.
So each time that that there's been a new executive order that's been put in place. Sorry, each time there's been an executive order that's been put in place, we follow it up and try to adopt or try to follow it as far as the township goes. So right now, any of the employees that are coming in are being screened in the morning and being logged in. They have, there's masks over there. I believe there's still gloves over there. If not, we can get some more. Quite frankly, it's difficult getting some of the disinfectant solutions. So even at the fire department, we've been mixing bleach and making up disinfectant solutions. So that's probably going to be our biggest challenge, I would say. As far as the masks and things like that, though, I think we're in pretty good shape as a township.
Well, mask and gloves. So the one thing we'd have to do is get disinfected.
The disinfectant seems to be difficult for us right now.
Let's hope the article I read this weekend in the paper that one of these companies it's not one of the name brands, but they do make some of the disinfectants and wipes. I guess one of the biggest challenges was the packaging. You know how you get the tall round canisters. They've come up with a way to make their processing simpler and easier to put it in more of a flat pack type-ish item. That it sounds like the middle of the month, if it works out, that they're going to be able to really ramp up on some of those wipes and things like that. So let's keep our fingers crossed, because that's what the market needs.
I know Jacob Supply has pallets of that sanitizer that they're, so I mean, I'm sure there's some stuff. I know there's a 10-up selling different sanitizers at I think his store more selling. I mean, there's a lot of areas selling different stuff like that. So I'm sure we're able to get some of that stuff. But Ms. Hirschberg, could you look into that? I mean, have you looked at Quill? Can we get a hold of any of that stuff?
We've been trying to order through Quill and they have been out. Right now, they're only giving it to like the firefighters, the police departments, things like that. They have a special number that they call and they can get a hold of those things. But we cannot get a hold of it yet. We keep trying.
Okay. So.
About the only thing that I know that like personally, like we can't get is like the Sandy wipes. That's like the only thing that really is still, that I've seen personally, that's still like, you can't get it.
If we have rubber gloves on, why would you need to sanitize a piece of material coming in it if we have rubber gloves on?
Every time you touch something, you're gonna have to take those gloves off, because otherwise you're contaminating everything you touch.
So you just have to swap out gloves every time you touch something, which should be a lot of gloves, so.
Correct.
Right. As long as the chemical doesn't destroy the gloves, you could, sanitize your gloves every time without throwing them away, but still, you go through the wipes then every time too.
Well, like I said, I know there's, I know there's stores out there. One of our local stores has pallets and pallets and pallets fulls of this sanitizing spray. So you could spray your glove every time you touch, I guess.
As long as you don't touch your face or anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's.
It's gonna be difficult.
So, Mr. Francis, are we gonna have somebody manned in that office Monday through Friday?
Does the board want to have it open from 8 till 5, Monday through Friday?
Yes.
After the 15th, when it's lifted?
Is that when it's lifted, or did the governor's order extend it to the end of May?
Yeah, but why would we wait at all in the Treasurer's Department? It's essential.
She's not, she doesn't stop any of these functions. Like, or as of right now, I guess. That we're not talking about functions that would be released on the 15th or the 28th, that these would be, like, we don't need her permission.
Okay, I'll meet with Krista and we'll work something out and let the board know. Is that satisfactory?
This was me.
Well,
yeah.
I think the comment made earlier about maybe getting a different sign to point out where the drop box is, that people haven't been there, we could do that easily, I would think.
I need somebody to explain to me the difference between someone being there and being available to talk to our residents and them picking them up through the bank teller slot as opposed to the Dropbox slot. There's someone there. There's someone picking up the exact same documentation that's being dropped off. Only there's someone there to actually talk to the residents and make them feel. I had one of the guys that stopped and talked to me. He saw the slot and he just was like, I just don't feel. Are they coming through? Are they picking it up? What are they doing? And I felt stupid because I forget, someone had, maybe Miss Tinnevery had said, well, I thought people were already in there. And I thought the same thing. And I'm looking stupid to a resident going, I thought somebody was in there. But yes, I could tell them at least, yeah, like, don't worry, they'll pick it up. They're making their rounds, whatever. There's no difference to me between picking it up and not being there when the residents are there, and picking it up when the resident's there and being able to at least be in that window.
Well,
I understand. I think our concern was mainly because of the potential of the virus being spread through that. That's where we were concerned in protecting our people. Let me look into get something back to you. Your concern is valid. We're either open or we're not open. And if it's determined that we need to be open, well, then we need to staff it. And I don't think you need more than one person in the Treasurer's Department until we reopen the counter. That's where we need the other people.
So when somebody
we might need a little help with, the sewer bills getting out. So we called Amy in to do that. That's fine.
So when somebody calls the Treasurer's Department, whose cell phone is it going to if nobody answers it at Township Hall?
Krista told me today that all of the messages left were answered by her. Every one of them, every single call.
We go to her.
So the call, if she doesn't answer her cell phone, then it just leaves a message at Township Hall or on her cell phone then, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what's the pleasure of the board? We want to let.
Well, I was going to say, does anybody else have any weigh in on, I mean, I guess that's my main concern. I just don't know, do we have any sort of, what about other departments? I don't know what, I don't know if there was anything set for anything for anyone. I think it's kind of like.
I'll speak to you on my departments, the assessing department. We have Alan and Chrissy in there working every day. One of the Chrissy had somebody pass, so I mean, she's been home for a few days dealing with funeral stuff, but they're working every day. Teresa's working from home. She's getting all of her work from Chrissy, and they're forwarding. She's staying busy. The other employees are still laid off. The building department, Dennis is working from home. The calls, when somebody calls the building department, and the problem is until today, nobody had, unless you had their direct line, you couldn't get a hold of them. Okay, if you called the 847-6791, there was only 5 options, and to get a hold of the clerk, the treasurer, or the supervisor, or the ordinance. So you couldn't get a hold of them out of the departments unless you had a direct line. Well, now that they're on the phone tree, so if it goes to Dennis Kohler, it says call his cell phone. So his cell phone's, he's dealing with a lot of that, and he's still doing essential calls. So like if somebody needs a first,
he's going
to come in the 7th.
Okay.
And Linda will be coming in the 7th. Both those employees will be coming back because they're considered essential at that point. Now, I don't know, is planning considered essential at that point since building is?
Not that I'm aware of.
So they're going to continue to work from home. And I can't speak to them. I don't know exactly what they're doing. I'm sure if you ask me, there's a lot of stuff that could be done with planning with legal that are floating, as far as ordinance changes and amendments and working on different things with changes with different ag property. I know they're discussing that to shrink the size of the requirements. So different stuff like that. I don't know what they're working on, so.
They've been working on a lot of stuff with the engineers, and they also have 2 meetings that they'll be dealing with. They will have a planning commission meeting on the 27th, and I believe they'll have a BZA meeting coming up in May. Rick, have you heard anything about
June?
June, sorry.
We are supposed to have a BZA meeting in June, and a letter Karen sent out. There will be, I believe, a planning in the latter part of the month.
Right, May 27th, I thought she said.
Correct, I think that's it.
Yes.
And those will also be televised, or I should say video, remote.
Correct. But yeah, they've been working on a lot of things. They pop in and out of the office to grab things, but they've been trying to do everything from home, working on ordinances and anything else that they need to take care of. They've been working remote.
So like ordinance, you still only have 2 employees working in ordinance. We're probably getting to the point where we need to bring back Shayla because grass complaints are going to start up, and she typically handles grass complaints. Maintenance is working as normal because everything they've had to do has been essential. So they just got started on grass a week or so ago, so they're getting caught up with that. Other than that, as soon as this gets lifted and we need to, but right now, Pete, we don't want to be sending Pete out in the field to be going to homes,
No.
So, I mean, we want to avoid that. And Kelly's main thing she does is answer phones and do all the PREs and work like that. So I think a lot of that the other 2 employees are picking up.
Well, I don't think that there's public outcry. People are calling in missing Pete, that they needed Pete to come assess their property value.
No, we just have to do the 20% here. So
I'm guessing
when we do reopen, we could bring in Josh. Josh is working for maintenance right now. If we needed to get caught back up to our 20%, we could always bring him in as seasonal to get caught back up because we typically want to do our 20% every year. So.
Well, I guess that's my biggest concern is the residents that are looking for us. And like I said, nobody's looking for Pete. I'm more concerned for people that are looking to pay their sewer bill and don't feel comfortable I'm dropping a check and a piece of paper off, and man, I hope this gets, I'm not trying to get a late charge, or and obviously we know that that's not going to be the case, but I still don't see how we couldn't have someone at the very least available at that window. I think Trudy's department is, I think, really important. I just don't think it's as clear and concise and obvious of a solution just because of not having a window. It's hard. I think that's a harder one until we open the doors and whatnot, to say how exactly we go about that. But I think at the very least having something at that window, I don't care who it is. Maybe it's Pete.
Yeah, you don't want Pete at that window. All right, well, we'll let Mr. Francis figure something out and report back to the board. But as far as what the governor's orders is, May 15th, I think it's still a little unclear of what is going to happen. So we'll keep you guys updated and keep moving forward. So, yeah.
Miss Tinberry, I hadn't thought
Yes.
about it. What you guys don't have a drive-through window. What's Ida doing?
We're in the office. Well, I was part-time, so we have Monday and Wednesday people and Tuesday and Thursday people, and we're always closed on Friday. We're taking people that have to build building permits or have to leave off PREs for their house or whatever. We meet them at the door. They leave it on the doorstep. We spray it off and bring it in, leave it lay on a separate table for a while. We don't all come in at the same time, so it's much easier for us. We've really never stopped working because we only have, like, the clerk and myself are the only, well, the clerk, myself, and the building inspector, but we're all 6 feet apart, so it's really not an issue. We're a smaller office, but we do see the need. We have phone calls, tons of phone calls every day. So the public does need to interact with their elected officials, even if it's just with questions. So we're there.
Thank you. I just thought of that. I just wanted to ask while I was thinking about it.
Okay, so moving on. Any more comments from anybody? Okay, moving on. G, the discussion of temporary permanent plexiglass for township counters. So this was something Trudy and I talked about last week. The discussion of whether or not we need to put plexiglass on the counters that are temporary, or we put plexiglass that covers the whole opening for security reasons as well. I know upstairs, in let's say the planning division, you've got employees up there sometimes by themselves working, and it would be nice if you had some security up there, to where you could actually cover that opening and cut a slot out to where people could slide things back and forth. And plus that would keep the germs at bay. If somebody's up there, packing or whatever, you have that plexiglass that kind of protects the employees. So when we do open up, we could open up safe. But I talked to Ms. Hirschberger, while we're at the discussion, let's bring it to the board and say, hey, should we cover the full opening and cut a slot out, or do we put temporary plexiglass in there to where you could just kind of have an opening to where you could deal with the resident through that type deal? It's about $175 per office to get it done. Our maintenance people would do it. So just thought we'd bring it here for discussion. Ms. Tinberry?
Well, I think that we're taking some drastic measures. I know you're probably all gonna, say, well, I'm not interested in protecting the employees. It has nothing to do with that. But this is a once in a lifetime thing well, I shouldn't say once. We've had pandemics before, but there's so many other, we have the perfect setup for limiting the public coming in. Remember, this is their building. This is the public building. And we have a foyer that's huge. We have a little room off the foyer where we could use as a detention area. Putting up plexiglass to me is so cold and so limiting of what the public, what this building is all about. When it was built, I mean, I call it the Taj Mahal because it's so huge. There's the walkways between the clerk's department and supervisors and upstairs. I mean, my office in the old building was, I mean, it wasn't even a quarter the size of your hallways, and there are hallways in this building, but it was built for an open, free look. And so to put up plexiglass is just, to me makes it so cold. It cuts off that openness, the fact that we're working for the people. I think utilizing that foyer for downstairs or upstairs as well, before you go into those double doors that go back into the planning commission, you can put, I've seen many places now put tape down the middle of the thing, and you can't cross over the tape unless you're called up to the counter. There's, someone said earlier, putting tape X's on the floor. It's just so, I hate to see plexiglass going up in a building that was built for openness and seeming so open to the public. We could even get thermometers that they could check the people's temperature. It's just, I don't know. It's not about, well, it is kind of about the cost, putting up something to change the beauty of the building. I'm not saying it's a huge cost, but it's a cost that I think we could find other measures to meet the need for the temporary time, where it's not going to be forever. But plexiglass, you buy it, what are you going to do with it once it's not useful anymore? It's just my opinion.
Yeah,
Do you have any thoughts on it? I mean, you brought the idea to my attention. I just thought while we're talking about it, you could have the discussion with the board as far as if you're going to do plexiglass, to where the employees could work, through the plexiglass to the public. You might as well talk to the board about covering the whole deal and putting a slot, so there's no germs going back and forth.
Right. I was going to do the plexiglass because of the 6 feet. You're supposed to stay 6 feet from each other. There's no way our counters that you can stay 6 feet away from from the customer and be able to help them with paperwork and such. So I was thinking a temporary plexiglass just to keep the germs from one to the other. So you won't have that 6 foot, but at least you'll have a barrier in between. Other companies were doing this as a temporary thing that we could use during this pandemic. So I'm still going to do it. I mean, we don't have to have it permanent, but I am going to put a section in my department so that my employees don't get sick in case when we open to the public that they're not bringing it in. I've had too many residents and other people who come in for passports and they cough all over our counter, and then we have to clean it and we don't know if we're going to catch it. So to protect my employees, and vice versa, if my employee gets it, they don't want to give it to a resident, I'm going to put some kind of barrier up for a temporary.
And that was where I said, hey, we should bring it to the board about, like, Trudy's going to do the temporary thing. I brought it here to talk to the board and say, hey, while she's going to do that, okay, temporary thing, let's talk to the board about what it would look like to put it there. Like I said, there's times when there's employees upstairs by themselves. So, I mean, if we're going to do something and spend the money, do it right and put it across there. But like I said, it was just to bring to the board, get your thoughts. Mr. Matra?
Is it, according to everyone else's logic, on the last agenda item, isn't the glass non-effective? Like, didn't we just say the glass isn't going to work for the drive-through? So according to that logic, this is illogical. And then according to that logic at least. And then secondly, I would echo Ms. Tinberry's points, and I like the word cold. I would be adamantly opposed to anything permanent. Just the visualization of that, like a ghetto corner store, or like in a prison system where you have glass like that between the public and our officials, and it's just a cold. It's so not human. I'm just adamantly opposed to anything like that that's permanent like that. I wouldn't be necessarily, I'm being facetious about the logic of the glass not working, because I think the glass does work, hence why I think someone could totally be at that window. But so I'm not opposed to that, but I'm definitely adamantly opposed to anything that would be permanent and cold like that. That's a good word.
Okay, any other board members have thoughts?
I got a comment. Nancy mentioned earlier about maybe using the vestibule for a temporary holding area, if you will. What if we had a buzzer out there or something and asked them to buzz what department they want and let them in one at a time? Or a few at a time? Because the way it is in a lot of cases, while you might have 6 to 8 people standing in line waiting to be serviced by either the clerk's department or at times the treasurer's department, several people standing in line. That sort of defeats the whole purpose if you want to be 6 feet away from everybody. Maybe we ought to limit the amount of people that can come in that main door.
Paul, that's where I was saying the same thing, sort of staging. If there was a phone number on the door, when they approach the door, they call whichever department, and we could put the direct line on there for that department. Call into that department. They say, okay, we're going to let you in, or we have X amount in queue in front of you. Give them a verbal number if you have to, and say, we'll call you, or give you your cell phone number. We'll call you right back.
It's not only protecting us, it's protecting them also, as I see it.
It's a two-way street.
Mr. Supervisor, you have to get in line to get in. Shalee knows. The line sometimes all the way around the parking lot. My other question is, what are you going to do about the restroom? I mean, how do you handle the restroom is open to the public, and how do you know when people come in there? I mean, I don't think we can go be so cautious as we protect against everything. I mean, the restroom should be disinfected all the time. I'm not saying that, but I just think that there are other precautions that we can put in place besides the plexiglass, I guess. And if there's a cut in the bottom of it, how does that keep the germs out? And when you have to do a passport, you can't do that through the plexiglass.
Well, can I make a comment? I've been to a lot of places where they have plexiglass at checkout stands, for instance. It protects somebody from coughing directly on you. Is it a foolproof system? No, but it helps.
Mr. Clements.
I just wanted to say that when plexiglass went up, we were X number of days ago, and it was X number of executive orders ago. And as we sit today, whether we like it or not, if you're going to be out in public, you're supposed to have a mask on. And so that's going to provide some relief to the contamination and the distancing. I agree with Craig that if we're going to do something that's precautionary, I think that's one conversation. I am not in love with the idea of erecting permanent glass in town hall. But I think we have to be careful that we're not making policy today based on where we were as a state 2 and 3 weeks ago. We're evolving very quickly. And my only suggestion would be is if maintenance can put it in, and if it can be done in less than 2 or 3 days, this may be one where we want to hold off and see where we're going as a state, see where we're going with some of the regulations, and decide, does this in fact still make sense 10 days from now? I mean, it's crazy that the world we're in 10 days can make a huge difference to all kind of legal and social implications.
Well, let's be honest. I mean, she could extend, some things till May 30th. So I mean, we're not out of the woods yet of coming back May 15th, but
Absolutely.
I disagree with the fact that Ms. Hirschberger preparing, even when it does get lifted, to have some sort of, they deal with a lot of people at that counter when it's open, and they're pretty close to each other, and you have to be to sign you know what I mean? So anyways, I think, we'll hold off on the plexiglass, permanently for sure. Like I said, it was just a thought to bring to the board, and, Trudy's gonna do what she's gonna do with her department to, because she's allowed to spend under $500 and, without board approval. So if she wants to get plexiglass, she can. Mr. Francis?
I think if the clerk's department is going to have a temporary plexiglass in, I think the treasurers should too, because we have a lot of people coming in. Another thought I had is if we stop the people from coming in out in the vestibule, we could have a supply of masks there and request or even demand that they put a mask on before they come in. Just an idea. Relatively cheap to do.
I agree with demanding that they have a mask on when they come in the township hall, but for the number of people, since the tax bills haven't gone out, the number of people that'll come in to pay bills, couldn't we put a gate up and they step down to the clerk's department and they could take the money through the one plexiglass, so that we're not putting up plexiglass that's not going to stay up?
Well, personally, I think all the work should be done in the treasurer's department through the drive-through until this is totally gone, period. There's no reason we need to allow, an extra, when they start doing bills, sometimes there's a lineup. So, I think they could definitely utilize the drive-through to limit traffic through there until this is totally gone. As far as passports goes, Trudy, that's something you can continue to hold off on probably to minimize traffic through the window.
Yeah, I can hold off passports for a while.
So that's something we're not in a big hurry to get back into doing. So there's a lot of stuff that can be done without the public coming in for now. So I think we need to move forward though. But as far as mosquito dunks, I don't know what to do with mosquito dunks because people are wanting them, and we have no way of getting them to them. Something that I talked to Ms. Hirschberger about was, the possibility of putting them in a store and having them hand them out to the public and they show ID type deal. I don't know if that's a possibility or, it was just a thought because we want people to keep because you do have some issues with the mosquitoes. We want to keep them at bay. So we are getting a lot of requests for them.
But we'd have to keep track of who's getting them 30 days because we're running very, very low. And that's probably something we won't be replacing with this money issue we're going to be having and the cuts in the revenue sharing.
So, okay. All right, with no more discussion, we're going to move on to 8H, which is, get my agenda item here. I sent everybody an email with, hold on one second. It's for the dust control for the contract for dust control with the Monroe County Road Commission. Does everybody have the email in front of them that I sent them? So you can look at the contract, so you have it in front of you. It's 2 applications, 16-foot wide, solid 2,000 gallons per mile. The first application is in June. The second application after Labor Day. It's calcium chloride, which is a better material. It holds longer. It definitely works. It keeps the dust down. It is $40,530. But it's not something that, like I said, it was something that we it kind of slipped through the cracks with everything that's going on. It's something that they need to get started on, I believe, next week. So they got a hold of me today and let me know that, hey, this has got to be approved if we're going to get the work moving. So nobody has any further questions on it or comments. Something I think we need to get approved. And Ms. Hersberger, if we do approve it tonight, could we get it printed off and both of us sign it tomorrow?
Yes.
We can send it back to the road commission ASAP.
Can someone who's been around a little longer than I have just talk on like the essentialness of this operation? $40,000 on dust at a time like this. It's a lot of money, but I assume it's not like a. I just want to hear someone.
Have you ever lived on a dirt road?
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
well, in the summertime, when it's very dry and you don't have any of the dust control on there, it creates a lot of dust and it can become a health hazard for residents, especially people with underlying issues, asthmas, different stuff like that. The calcium chloride, the dust control almost puts a stop to it. Okay, so it's one of them things. Do we have to do it? No, but it's something with the amount of local roads we have, or dirt roads we have. It's a very good service to the community, and you would have a lot of upset people if we didn't do it. I can tell you that right now, Ms. Stenberry.
Well, having worked at the road commission, I can tell you that this was one of the many, many calls that we took for all over the county. And of course, we don't have as many, they're gravel roads, they're not dirt roads, but not only can you not go outside, you can't have your windows open, you can't hang your clothes out. And yes, these people choose to live on a gravel road, but we do improve our paved roads and we should offer them some help for the gravel roads as well. So I would like to make a motion that we approve the contract for calcium chloride applications as presented by the Monroe County Road Commission on the local roads, 2 applications after Labor Day at a cost of $40,530.
I'll support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion. I just want to say that, with the dirt roads, we do get some questions as to why we do maintenance on dirt roads when we don't do maintenance on any other subdivision road. A lot of these roads that are dirt are subdivision roads. And we do get questions as to why do we spend money putting gravel down and putting dust control down and maintaining the gravel roads in subdivisions. They're subdivisions, and we don't do it in other subdivisions that are pavement. So I do get that thought process. Well, why do you, so I just wanted to throw that out to the board. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I think it's something that affects neighboring communities as well when you have lots of dust and wind blowing. So, okay, could you call a roll, please?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
He must be muted. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
There he is.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, up next is comments from the public. Comments limited to 5 minutes, so we'll wait for the calls to start coming in.
If they stayed up this late.
Somebody's having something loud going in the background. They need to mute it. So I just had somebody that works in the mail system send me a message and say that mail is not, the disease is not transmitted through mail.
Call coming in.
Concerning, go ahead, concerning with the drive-through window. But
Are they there?
Yes?
Hi, I'm Omar Frederick back again, 3254 Deer Creek Drive in Lambertville. At the last meeting, I would have spoken at length regarding the finances of the township for the current fiscal year and the next fiscal year commencing July 1. I forwarded an email to board members prior to that meeting outlining my belief that the $422,000 line item relating to state shared revenue for the current fiscal year was in doubt for obvious reasons. First, the virus impact on citizens, the closing of businesses, the unemployment of many workers has had a substantial impact on state sales and income tax revenues and other revenue streams. The current estimate by the state is that the impact on the state budget is between $1 and $3 billion for the current fiscal year ending in September, and from $1 to $4 billion for the 2021 fiscal year. Now, the state has a rainy day fund of about $1.2 billion now, but that doesn't cover the projected deficit. And by law, only a portion of the rainy day fund can be used without legislative approval. Something dramatic has to be done. Experience demonstrates clearly that among the first thing legislatures look at and reduce is state shared revenues. It happened in 2008, 9, and 10, as some board members today will remember, and I am sure it will happen this time for the remainder of this fiscal year for you and for the next fiscal year too. While no one knows for sure the magnitude of the impact, again, I strongly recommend spending for this fiscal year for the township be reduced to only fixed costs and no discretionary spending, and similarly, for the next fiscal year, the township budget, until the state finances become clear and the state shared revenues become more predictable, the same processes take place. Thank you for your time.
thank you for your comments. Well, I could tell for the people that we have another one coming in. Well, while we're waiting for the listeners, I could tell you this board over the past few years has done an excellent job of saving money, negotiating contracts, and really getting things down to the bare bones. So we're in a good position to be prepared for something like this. Somebody needs to mute their end, but I don't know who it is. Somebody needs to mute their end. But you know, okay. All right, let's move on to comments from township board members. Mr. Montre.
I think that's Mr. Francis. If Mr. Francis, if you want to mute yourself.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Why don't everybody mute it except for Craig and whoever's talking at the moment?
There's a call coming in too, by the way.
Go ahead, Craig. Well, it's.
Do you want me to go ahead or do you want to wait for the call?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, all right. So I wanted to, let's go into, okay. So I want to state publicly first that I think we should go back to having live meetings after this meeting. I think we can do that totally in a completely safe way and not be dealing with all of this. I don't see any reason why we can't do that. A man who I greatly admire, a guy named Jim Rohn, not Jim Rome, the sports guy, a guy named Jim Rohn, has a quote that he says, "It's better to live 30 years full of adventure than 100 years safe in a corner. And I think that people need to reflect upon that. And lastly, I would say recall Gretchen Whitmer, and that's it.
Mr. Clements?
The only thing I have is we have our budget meeting tomorrow. And I just want to commend you, Mr. Supervisor, for the work you've been trying to do to save money. I think you said earlier that this board has worked hard to save money over the last 3 years. I think you've taken the lead on that, and I appreciate that. And I think it's going to set us up to really have to endure, and I use the word endure, the next budget year, because it's not going to be what we want it to be. But we absolutely have to deal with the hand that's been dealt to us, and I trust that we'll do it. The last thing is I want to say thank you again to George Welling for putting this together. It's difficult. It's not easy to get done. And in light of the circumstances, I also appreciate all my other board members for the patience that everybody's shown, willingness to let each other talk. It's not ideal, but it's certainly better than what I anticipated it to be. Thank you much.
Thank you. Ms. Titteberry?
Sorry, I didn't mute. Well, first of all, I want to chastise my fellow board member, Craig Montry, because he's campaigning during board time. Totally uncalled for. You can't be talking about recalling anybody. And then I have a few things here I'm sorry to say. I cut many of them out. I'm gonna just try to go through quickly. But I feel like I need to publicly comment on the last meeting and the fact that I tried many times. I was here, I was on in the meeting, and as soon as it turned 7 o'clock, the message came up, your session has ended. There was no way I could get back in. I tried, I had 10 phone calls or text messages to IT Right. I texted George many times during the whole meeting. And it was a very, very frustrating time for me because I had several things. I had done my research on that meeting, and I had many things that I wanted to comment on, but was prevented to do that, not any fault of my own. I did everything I was supposed to do. And for some reason, there was a glitch, there was a problem, there was an error, whatever you want to call it. I was unable to participate in the meetings. I would say that before we put anybody else on, if the problem is that you can't have too many people on at a time, the trustees and the 3 full-time officials should be the first to be included in the meeting. The people who are decision makers, long before the attorney, long before the fire chief, long before anyone else, it needs to be the trustees. So, and I echo Craig's comment. I'm willing and able to return to open, regular meetings. There's plenty of room in our boardroom to social distance. We could all wear masks. There's other opportunities rather than this. Even tonight, there were several problems, issues. No one was prevented from being in the meeting, but there were several issues, and I think it's much better to be live. The second thing I wanted to talk about was, and I don't want to get into a discussion about it, but I think it's imperative that we do something about this ordinance violation in Prairie Woods. You've all received as many emails on it as I have. It is a safety issue for children being out in the street. It's a safety issue for people going on walks and bike rides. I think that there's just no reason why we shouldn't push to get this taken care of. And Mr. Supervisor, I know you are doing what you can do, but if that ordinance needs to be changed, we need to change it post haste. We can't put it on the same track that other ordinances are. Let's get that fixed so that these people don't have to suffer for this any longer. It's been way too long already. And then I'm also wanted to comment on the article in the Bedford Press that is a good newspaper, as she says, and I totally agree. And there was an excellent article in there on our fire department and how they came to the rescue of a gentleman and saved his life. And I think that we need to promote that paper. I mean, maybe this is an ad for that paper, but it is a good newspaper. There's all kinds of wonderful things in there. You don't have to listen to the nightly news and hear all the coronavirus stuff. That is such a downer. So thank you all. Thank you for including me in your meeting tonight. Thank you for the decisions that were made. And I'll participate however, but I just would appreciate going back to the live meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Steiner? Mr. Steiner?
Yes, I was just getting myself unmuted here.
Okay.
Just a couple things here. Just want to say I heard something today by on TV by a gentleman named Mike Rowe. You may not recognize the name, but I guarantee if you saw his face or heard the voice, you would know exactly who I'm talking about. If you get a chance, look this guy up online. He used to do a show called Dirty Jobs or Dirtiest Jobs on TV. And anyway, this gentleman came on and somewhat to Craig's point, he basically said that there is no one out there that is a non-essential employee when it comes to our world of the United States of America and freedom and the economy. Every person out there is essential to this world in one way or another in their jobs. I don't care whether you're a restaurant worker, whether you're a grass cutter, whether you're a healthcare, EMTs, all that. Granted, those are the first line responders. Yes, definitely essential, but everyone plays a part and an essential role in our overall economy for this country. It was a pretty good little interview to hear that. So I believe that strongly too, that everyone out there is essential and we all do our part. The next thing, Ms. Tinbury got part of what I was going to say about the Prairie Woods issue. I know that Mr. Peroni and I have had some emails back and forth. I've also had some correspondence directly with some of the neighbors in that neighborhood. We're looking into various things, whether it's ordinance. I know that there have been ordinance calls. There have been references to the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. Looking into see if there's anything in county road regulations. So far, nothing prohibits them from the parking of this commercial equipment on the roadways. It's a difficult situation. I hope we can find a way to get something resolved and get some relief for those residents. I drove back there myself, and it's definitely an issue to be seen and see what we can do to take care of and help the residents. I also know another subdivision. Couple issues. One of them was an ordinance issue. Actually, I'll tell you, it was Hickory Creek subdivision in the rear plat. There were some ordinance violations there. Again, ordinance department is taking a look at those and helping get that cleaned up. Actually, Monroe County Road Commission is taking care of one of the issues, even though it's not their responsibility. They said they would do a one-time on it. Hopefully that rectifies it. In that general vicinity of the neighborhood this weekend, there was a call about emergency call, I should say. A fire department EMTs went flying through the neighborhood. And when I say flying, they were cautious. They weren't really flying. But anyway, they go back and they do their job, find out that there was ATVs and four-wheelers and everything running up and down the streets. Really a poor situation, unsafe situation. And I know it's probably partly caused by everyone is cooped up at home and everybody needs to burn off that energy. But we do need to respect the laws and regulations, and four-wheelers, ATVs, and things like that are not supposed to be on the roadways. And I'm not sure if someone was taken away in an ambulance or if they were just attended to. But that's something that I know it's not just this subdivision. There's various subdivisions that have potential issues like that because people they get out and do things thinking they can do whatever they want for the activity. I'm all for someone enjoying their lives and being able to have as much fun and activity as they can, but it all still has to be done in a legal manner. So with that said, everyone, try to do the right things, protect yourselves. I know none of us like it, but we still have to practice, at least for a while longer, this social distancing. Do the best we can. Again, if it's not just protecting you, it's protecting your friends and family and other people that you may come into contact with. Other than that, basically stay safe, everyone.
Mr. Francis?
The only comment I would like to make tonight is what I too would prefer to have the face-to-face board meeting. I'm concerned about the social distancing issue regarding the public that might want to attend. Board members can sit every other seat and be fine, but what about the public? We're asked to wear masks. We ought to provide masks or don't let them in. It's a complex issue. It's the public that we want to have participate, but how do you do that and still abide by the social distancing? I'm just a little concerned about that. If it can be worked out, I have no problem with it and would prefer a meeting like that. The other comment is I think there's still someone waiting in the lobby to be for a phone message. Is that true, or is that just an old item?
I think there is, but I mean, we're past public comment. We waited. I mean, if we want to, I mean, we're about to run out of time here. 14 minutes. I mean, what do you want to do?
I say let them speak.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, George. Pass him through.
Hello?
Yes, hello?
Hello. Yeah, I heard Mr. Peroni and I said hello and then I got hung up on. So at any rate, I apologize, but I'm going to be persistent. At the last meeting, the supervisor referenced the owner of a compost site having.
Could you
I will
state
turn
your name
down
and
my
address?
TV. I'll turn down my TV.
Could you state your name and address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Gail, and the last name is Kane at 1056 West Temperance. At the last meeting, the supervisor referenced the owner of a compost site having another site. And I was wondering if the public can be privy for you to disclose the name of that business and the place of where that site was at. Now, in other matters, I'm very concerned and was very upset that Mr. Francis's retirement has to be tainted by the obvious and blatant political ploy by the supervisor and his supporters. Ironically, you've got that department. There's been pot shots made at the last two meetings regarding the employees in that department, and I do believe that this is politically based. You were critical of when Mr. Francis was in the office. I know for a fact who's been there, and I'm wondering how often has Mr. Peroni been in the office since the corona? His radio show has been, in place. And as far as the stuff being political, Ms. Bork was but a trustee. That's a major factor in how this should be handled. At the same time, we had a member of the planning department publicly get up at a meeting and say he was running for office and was endorsed by the township representative to that planning department. I don't understand how it's okay for some people and not for others. Is it acceptable that a township official would use a township committee to request votes for his campaign, or for an elected official to use his election campaign to sponsor a township event? We have a supervisor who advocates specific businesses. I don't know. There's an awful lot of things that are going on that I feel are inappropriate by some members of the board. The other thing is that we have the supervisor's office not being listed as essential. Our firemen are essential and should not be tied up at the township hall doing hand wipes or taking temps. And so why should we put these at a greater risk? I would suggest that everybody be mandated to wear a mask, that our supervisor greet each person who comes to the township hall in the vestibule, that he be there to take the temperatures, that he apply or offer a mask, and that he be instructive of the flow of traffic going in and out. I'm very frustrated with the way things went tonight. I'm frustrated with how people are being treated, and this has been an ongoing issue. This goes against your policies and the conduct becoming of an elected official. And, you know, I have to laugh because you were all critical of the governor last week, and yet now here we all are trying to figure out how we're going to take care of her orders. This is confusing to me. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And I'm not a stupid person, but I really feel that there's a lot of things that just this township needs to clean their act up. That's all there is to it. And it's up to the public to have to start stepping in and pointing these things out. It is an election year, and sadly enough, we don't have choices in all of our offices. And, you know, we all have our preferences, but the politics need to stay out of what's going on in this township. And what happened tonight and the comments that were made were totally unethical, and it was improper use of somebody's public office. That's all I have to say, and thanks for letting me come in.
Thank you for your comments. Have a good night.
Bye.
Okay. I can't even remember who we were on. Miss Hirschberg.
I only have a couple things. One, remind you, if you haven't seen it already, that we are going to try and do the newsletter. So we'll need your articles, so the board members. And then mid to late month, depending on, I guess, new envelopes we have to purchase now. The applications will go out. The new envelopes will be with the ballot, so the applications should be able to go out. Like I said, mid to late May, depending on when we can get the applications. And that's all I have.
Okay. Oh, it's unfortunate some of the things that were said in that last public comment. So far off, so untrue, and just sad. But we'll move forward and we'll continue to be positive, and we'll continue to do the good work we've been doing for the past 4 years. Like I said, I'm proud of what this board has done in the last 3-4 years, the money we've saved, the road work we've done. I can tell you this, I haven't missed probably one phone call that has come to the supervisor's office. All calls come to my cell phone. I keep it on me all day. Weekends, I'm able to get a hold of Facebook Messenger. I deal with all those messages on a daily basis. So I'm very available. If the public wants me to go sit in an office, okay, I can do that and go sit in the office for the last 2 months. But no, I'm working from home and I'm taking care of business as usual, and we're getting stuff done. But correct, I haven't been in the office, and for good reason, to minimize exposure to people. Mr. Pryor's been going in the office as needed. He's going to start going in there quite a bit more, but we're doing a very good job of how things are being run, and I appreciate it. So the Prairie Woods issue, I'm going to let Mr. Goldsmith weigh in on it, but it's in his hands at this moment. There's been a 30-day cease and desist letter sent out. It's unfortunate. It's sad. I've dealt with this issue. You've all gotten an email from ordinance as to how it's gone. But yes, there's major safety issues over there. I've talked to the road commission. The road commission can't enforce or oversee unless they're totally blocking the roadway. Okay, as long as they're legally parked. The sheriff's department can't do anything on their end because as long as they're plated properly and parked properly, they can't do anything. So the situation is they're running a business out of their home. Okay, so that's where it's going to end up. So that's what we've got to work on, and that's what's going to probably end up in court. Hopefully the resident complies and cease and desist the operation of a business over there, and we can get some relief to these neighbors, because it's just not fair. having to deal with what they're dealing with. So the parking lots, after the last meeting, I called the gentleman doing the parking lots. He's going to be starting on them, weather permitted. So work is going to be done probably in the next few weeks to a month, as long as we have good weather. I think he even done some work. He did some work last week. He's going to start on the library in the town and the parks first, because they're the ones we're doing work on are closed. The library's closed, so we want to get them done first. So, and then he'll do the fire departments. I just wanted to update the board that the controls are being worked on right now at the library. They should be done, I believe, this Friday or mid next week sometime. So that project will be done. So something to think about for the neighborhood that I've recommended is they need to get a strong homeowners association in that neighborhood. And then you can have, they could collect dues and have funds in place, and then they can put things in there like that. Not operating a business or not having multiple trucks, or, they could probably do a little bit more on their end if they created a good homeowners association. That's something, we lack in a lot of our neighborhoods is good HOAs. Something right now, we have companies that are selling outside in tents. We got a couple of phone calls that businesses are setting up tents in parking lot and selling supplies. Well, they can't get a permit right now at the township because we're closed. So that's something that, do you shut down these tents that are selling outside, or, what do you do in these situations? These are the situations where I think ordinance should be able to give out a permit like that, to where they can sell some of the supplies. There's different things that, like I said, there's a store that's selling face masks, sanitizer, and stuff like that in a parking lot, and they're drive through and you pick it up. And I wanted to talk about Summerfest a little bit. The fireworks, as of right now, are canceled or postponed until next year. It's not looking like that event is going to happen, sadly. With the protocols that are in place and the amount of people that are going to be allowed to be in one place in public, will probably prohibit that from happening. We'll be making an announcement soon about that. The roundabout update, I had a conference call with the road commission last week and Manica Smith Group. The numbers are back down to where they need to be. We went through with a fine-tooth comb, took out some of the things that we felt like we didn't have to have, one being high dollar street lights. We took that out. We're going to utilize some of the poles that are already there, wooden poles. That was able to cut out $100,000 out of the plan. We took out the sidewalks. Personally, I don't think that area is going to be walkable. That was something we were able to save a decent amount of money with. So the total cost of the construction is right around $750,000 for the construction end of it. What they're going to do at this point is they're going to put it out for bid and see where the numbers come in at. If they can come in within the 10%, the project will be moving forward. But that's kind of where it's at this point. We were trying to figure out, well, hey, are we going to have to, can I get a motion to extend the meeting 5 minutes?
Motion to extend the meeting 5 minutes.
Support.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 You need a roll call, Trudy. Can't hear you.
Who made the motion in the second? I didn't catch it.
Montry, and then I think TC.
Clements.
Okay, all I works. Thank you.
So that's kind of where we're at with the roundabout. Still moving forward. Some of the rumors that were out there that, the project's, way out of whack is false. But I want to thank the community for their patience with this, with our government center. We're doing the best that we can do. Under the circumstances, we're doing the best we can do to communicate to keep business going, and really, I appreciate the clerk's office and all their work they're continuing to do. I know you guys have been in there on almost a daily basis, getting stuff done and preparing. To be quite honest with you, I have been answering probably 50 phone calls a day from my cell phone. But I want to thank all the departments that have been coming in. I know Chris has been coming in and taking care of the sewer bills and stuff, and so I appreciate everybody continue to do that. I want to thank all the healthcare workers, the first responders, grocery workers, garbage workers, and restaurant workers for continuing the work that you're doing under the circumstances. And I know we appreciate all of you and everything you're doing. I wanted to mention people, we are still have open burning till the end of May. Believe I'm right saying that. Yep, correct. The end of May. But keep in consideration with the neighbors when burning. I know a lot of people will burn wet leaves and let them smolder, but follow the ordinances. They have to be put out by 6 o'clock on weekends. And then keep in mind with Mulch King that you could take your leaves, your grass, your sticks over there free of charge to Bedford residents. We are getting calls about dead animals. We don't pick up anything but deer. We pick up deer because we have a system in place and a budget in place to where we can tag them properly, and we have somebody that comes and takes care of them. But we don't pick up the raccoons and different stuff like that. That is something that eventually we could look at, but as of right now, we don't because there's really no protocol in place for it. But other than that, if nobody has any further comments, Mr. Clements?
Mr. Supervisor, I believe you accidentally passed over Mr. Francis's comments.
I think he was done with his comments.
No, I'm finished.
My apologies. Thank you.
So other than that, yeah, I look forward to the budget tomorrow. And we're doing it on the same platform, but I do think this board needs to have a discussion of how we want to have our next board meeting. Okay, I mean, right now, it's been discussed, but there's been nothing decided. So should we take a roll call, Trudy? Do we want to continue meetings like this, or do we want to continue to have our next meeting at Township Hall?
I think you would need Goldsmith to weigh in on public being allowed in if we have a meeting at the township. Because I think we would have to open the doors to the public.
Can I comment? Hello?
Go ahead, Nancy. You're muted.
Unmuted it. Okay, see, this is the problem. You probably make sure I'm muted. That's the whole thing.
I don't
I'll
have
be
any
quick.
control. Like Ms. I control the phone calls. I don't control the phone calls. George does.
Several townships throughout the county are meeting without the public. And I mean, we can still keep it close to the public because you have it on YouTube, you have it on other venues, but the boards in other townships are meeting in fact, I know tonight, IDA's meeting tonight, and I know several other boards are meeting in their township halls with the social distancing and wearing the mask and gloves if you choose to wear gloves.
How are they taking care of public comment?
Mr. Peroni?
Go ahead, Mr. Timber. Finish. I'll let you go next.
The public comment is in IDA, we have written public comment, people who read the agenda online and then call in, make comments. They're not done live at the meeting. But for us, I think we could do it the same way it is being done now.
Mr. Peroni?
Mr. Steiner, go ahead.
I believe I clarified that with Mr. Goldsmith. If we hold a public meeting with the board inside Township Hall, we must open the doors to the public. Mr. Goldsmith, is that correct?
You'll have to repeat that, Rick. I could not, you were breaking up. I couldn't hear it.
That the question was, and we emailed on this. I said, if we open the building to the township board members to conduct a full board meeting in person, we are required to open the doors to the public for that meeting, correct?
That's my opinion. If you're going to meet at the township hall, I believe the Open Meetings Act, even with the governor's executive orders, you would have to make the boardroom available to the public who wanted to be there. I don't think you can deprive the public of attending the meeting.
Can I ask Phil a question? You were at the Frenchtown Township Board meeting, and it was met, they met in their boardroom. Did they allow the public there?
Yes.
Oh, well, I know Ida doesn't, LaSalle doesn't. I don't know, maybe they're breaking the law, but I have not seen that law that it's required.
Mr. Supervisor, we're at the meeting extension limit.
Can I get a motion to extend it a few more minutes so we can wrap this up?
Mr. Supervisor, I'll make a motion to extend the meeting 10 minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion in support of Mr. Steiner. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 So, I mean, personally, I think the board could get together safely. Mr. Francis, if we do have a board meeting, would you be attending?
Sure.
Okay, so that would mean that one person would have to stand at the podium the whole time in order for us to keep that 6-foot distance. The other issue is we'd have to set up the boardroom in a manner to where if 15 people showed up, we have to keep everybody safe. I also know that George has expressed concerns as well about being at the meeting, while videotaping, which also I believe he could, shut the door and keep himself in that room the whole time and keep safe. But I mean, I don't know.
Well, then you'd have to have a podium too.
Hey, somebody just commented on the YouTube and said, what if members of the public have to call the clerk's office to get a ticket to the meeting and have limited tickets so that...
You can't do that. You cannot limit. If it's open, it's open.
Yeah, you could have 100 people walk in there if they wanted to.
So we can't, so how are you gonna, you can't limit how many people are gonna be there, but you're gonna have social distancing. You can't stop someone from coming to a meeting, but the governor can stop someone from making a living. None of this makes any sense.
Hang on a minute. The fire code limits the number of people in that boardroom. It's a sign right there how many people can be in there. It's limited.
I personally think logistically, until we see something more from the governor, we should probably do our next meeting the same way we've done it and get one more meeting out of the way. And I think we'll be in a lot better position of knowing where we're at. Let's do it one more meeting. We still have the stay home order in effect till May 15th. If it gets extended, then where we at, you know what I mean? We might as well plan to keep it the same way we are at least one more time.
Well, and Mr. Peroni, as you're stating, again, from a distancing and safety protocol and cleaning, okay, what happens about people taking the elevator? More than one person trying to get in the elevator, people touching the buttons in the elevators, people going up and down the stairway, using the handrails. I mean, somebody would have to be constantly on top of that cleaning. You've got restrooms. If somebody accesses a restroom, is somebody going to go in behind them and clean it? There are multiple things that need to be thought out before we can do that with the public coming in. You don't, like you said, you don't know. You might have one person, you might have 50 people show up.
I agree with Mr. Steiner. It's impossible, and at some point we'll have to start living our lives. But
that
go ahead if somebody wants to make a motion, go ahead. I would suggest
we don't need a motion. We could just keep it the way we've been doing it.
I'm going to make a motion that we have meetings live then.
Support.
Okay, motion in support of Ms. Tinneberry. Ms. Hirschberger. Do we have any more discussion? Ms. Hirschberger, could you call roll, please?
Mr. Montroy,
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry,
Aye.
Mr. Clemens,
Aye.
Mr. Steiner,
Nay.
Mr. Francis.
No,
Hirschberger votes no at this time. Mr. Peroni,
Could you repeat the motion, please?
Motion was that we'll have our next scheduled township board meeting live and in person at Township Hall.
Okay, no. Okay. Motion
So-
failed 4-3, correct?
correct.
Okay, does anybody else have any further comments?
Paul?
Mr. Francis?
do I have any comments? No, I don't.
Oh, somebody said Paul.
Paul, Phil Goldsmith.
Oh,
Paul.
Phil, go ahead.
Did you want me to comment on the Prairie Woods matter now or not?
Please, just briefly.
We got 4 minutes.
Okay, I can do it. I can do it in 4. Damon Cecil delivered his investigatory packet to me today. I obtained information from Chief Deputy Pauly. Police report's been made about an altercation. I believe the conduct that's occurring out there is a violation of our home occupation ordinance, regardless of what we can or what we can't do on a public roadway. We will have a complaint ready to be filed with the Monroe County Circuit Court this Friday.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
And if anybody from Prairie Woods is still listening, we appreciate you guys taking action and really letting the board know. Appreciate it. If no further comments or questions, we stand adjourned.